time, like Soma wanted off. Soma rotated out back to New York. He was done. He didn't want to do this anymore. And so he's in the Danchenko interview in January, but he's his ticket's already punched. He's going back to New York. He's done with this. And he probably could, he already had the stink of it in his nose. He didn't want anything more to do with it. So I'm telling you guys, it is unheard of. Absolutely stunningly unheard of for an analyst to be the only one that takes notes and writes an EC, an electronic communication, not a 302, of an interview of somebody like Danchenko. That is so far out of bounds. And what it tells you is Soma didn't want to write it. And nobody else in there wanted to write it. So Outen said he'd write it, and they said, fine, you write it. And then everybody that's in that interview, except Outen, they're gone. So when March rolls around, those are new people. That's the Case Agent 6 or whoever it was, whoever took Outen's place. And what's remarkable in reading back through that stuff was, remember, Case Agent 6 is the one that said, I sent Soma a couple of emails asking him questions. He never responded. Well, how does that happen in an organization like the FBI? Somebody just gets away with not responding. Okay? That's the old rule. And I have reasons to know this, trust me. That's the old rule that says, I'm not putting anything down in writing on this anymore. You want answers? Call me. Or meet me, in the parking lot. But I'm not putting anything in writing. And I guarantee you that was Soma's attitude. So that explains the March re-interview. Is the new agent has questions. He reads the EC written by an analyst that for a 2-day interview to be memorialized in a 54-page EC that's double spaced. There's a shit of left out. I've seen ECs that go 200, 300, 400 pages, and 302s single spaced that go 8, 10, or 12 pages in one day. This is a 2-day interview, and you get a 54-page EC because that's all Outen knew to do. Because he's not
just real quick, is it possible that I think it was actually a 3-day interview, but is it possible that those were also recorded, and so therefore there was never any 302s for any of them, and that's why an analyst could be the one to write the EC?
I think I think he just volunteered, and nobody else was going to do it. Soma wasn't going to do it. Soma said, because a 3-day interview of somebody like Danchenko, you're talking about 12, 15 hours at the computer, getting it all right. And it's like, I'm out of here. My bags are packed. I'm not doing that. Brian Outen wants to do it. Have at it. Knock yourself out.
Excuse me, Ship. I'm sorry. Why are you assuming the point was to get it right?
Exactly.
Oh, no,
we're talking about Soma, for goodness sake.
Yeah. But at that point, they're still just, they're only a few months into the investigation. They're still doing what they would typically do. Look at other 302s they wrote in the same time frame, and they come out of there. Soma's the one to me who comes out of there based on what he wrote, saying, "Oh my God, look at how much he confirmed," and just ignored everything that he undercut. He comes out of there with the attitude that he validated parts of the Steele dossier.
No, I think that's right. I think that's how I read the January interview as well, and that's exactly how I read it. That January, he goes in there and he's talking to Crossfire Hurricane agents. He's talking to Laufman and Soma, and the whole point is to corroborate Crossfire Hurricane reporting. Yeah, so Danchenko's going to soften the edges on some of this, but basically this is how it went down. I totally agree. That's what happened in January. In March and May, it was different.
Well, in March and May, you got new agents, and they have questions, and they're not, and Soma won't call them back to answer their questions, so they go back to the source. They read a 54-page EC, and they think there's got to be more.
It's a different source. It's a different.
They have new questions.
It's a different.
Right. They have new questions because the Crossfire Hurricane guys are doing the interviews in January.
No, but
of course they should ask different questions.
There's a different handler of Danchenko at that point. There's a Washington field office agent on Danchenko at that point, and then they have a case agent 6 who's on the Carter Page investigation.
Right, but hold on. But keep in mind what's happening. You have 90-day re-ups on the FISA. Or is it 120 on a FISA? 90 on a T3. I think there might be 120 on a FISA. When they get them, they got them in October. 90 days, okay? And I guarantee you, those FISAs were coming up dry. They weren't getting anything. So they keep going back to Danchenko to see if there's better information that maybe got left out the first time around that they can use because you're supposed to renew your PC. You can't just use the same PC that you used 3 months ago when you don't when your warrant doesn't turn anything up. Normally your new PC is what you got over the 90 days. We got all this great information from our warrant over 90 days, so we want to keep listening or we want to keep digging.
Yeah, what about
No,
September?
but that's great.
September, November,
the
2017.
Crossfire Hurricane guys didn't go back to Danchenko. It was the Washington field office.
No, they're running Crossfire Hurricane.
No. The handler of Danchenko got switched to a Washington field office agent, not involved in Crossfire Hurricane. The case agent 6, the case agent, I forget the SSA at that point. They're not interviewing Danchenko. It's a different Washington field office dude.
Well, but again, that doesn't necessarily tell you anything because the way. No,
but I mean, it does though. You would think they would shift Danchenko to a case agent in Crossfire Hurricane.
No, yeah, but it doesn't. But the case agent is not always going to be the one that does the interview.
No, I understand that.
The FBI uses leads. They'll send out a lead and say, "We need this guy interviewed on these subjects," and then whoever's closest to him will go do it.
Right, but if you thought you were going to say, "I'm going to get another FISA warrant," why wouldn't they have case agent 6 in the interview with Danchenko?
It's just the FBI works. He doesn't have to be there as long as there's that's sort of the fiction. Hold on. The fiction of the Bureau is one agent's as good as another. It's crazy. It used to drive me crazy when I would find out that my case agent didn't go do a key interview. They sent a lead and had some agent who knew nothing about the case do the interview. It happens all the time.
Right. I mean, but also about those, I've heard that potentially Danchenko was made a CHS. I don't know if that is even possible.
Well, sure, they can make anybody CHS. There's no magic in making somebody CHS.
No, right. But I mean, I'm saying, would there be a point of making him a confidential human? Why didn't we get the ECs or 302s about Danchenko? Is my point. Is it because would it make more sense that he was a CHS at that point? Is that why we're not getting that information? Because we obviously got the January stuff. Why didn't we get the March, May, and beyond stuff?
Well, this is sort of, to me, this is kind of a little bit of a misconception in the public that you're ever entitled to that stuff. I mean, we're not obviously, but Baldock said we can have one of these. Yeah, so we know it existed. We know from the Horowitz report it existed. So why didn't they say, "Oh, have a redacted copy of these other shits"? My guess, and it's just a guess, is that the only thing that's been coming out is what Durham said. Okay, that can go out. And if there's something being held back on Danchenko, he just got indicted today. My guess is Durham held it back for whatever reason.
But that still wouldn't be entitled to a Glomar response or anything like that. They should still say, okay, we found X amount of pages and we're withholding them all or something like that. But instead it's delays. It's, there's no written record. We don't know what you're talking about. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, FOIA fan, I think he's already logged off, but he's been pushing this through appeals and all sorts of places, through OIG, through FBI, through DOJ. He's like, someone has got these and can't keep them from FOIA.
Yeah.
But they're keeping it somehow.
On the CHS, I just make a couple points, and I'll let somebody else come on. You guys don't want to just listen to me nonstop. On the CHS stuff, one of the only reasons they would make him a CHS is to pay him. And I'm not talking about paying him a lot of money. but just like $500 a month or $1,000 a month, or if he's got needs that can't be met because he caught up doing all this stuff and he can't work. There's all kinds of reasons why they make people CHS, but generally it's just to pay him and keep him friendly, because Danchenko could just walk away. He could just fly to Russia. He could do whatever he wanted. He'd disappear, and then they don't have him. So it's sort of, I mean, the whole kind of CHS thing is a little bit of a mystery that it doesn't need to be, and the reason why the Bureau does it is in 99% of the cases not nearly as sinister as people suspect, and the amount they're getting paid is not huge. It's a few $100s a month just to keep them on the books, and they're supposed to close them out when they're not providing any useful information over like 60 days. There's generally a process where they close out. They can open them up again. If the guy, if an agent closes a source out for unproductivity, and then the next week the source calls him and says, "Hey, just what I heard," they just open them back up again. It happens every day.
Yeah, but in the case of Crossfire Hurricane, both Steele and Halper are dirtbags, right?
And it seems
I'm sorry, there was no use for them.
Yeah, Halper is. I don't really want to trot out all the stuff that I suspect about Halper. I've probably written it over time, and now that my identity is no longer a secret, I probably should be more circumspect about what I say about him, since there could be a process server show up with a libel suit. But his history, it just so reminds me of somebody who was maybe a governmental player that wasn't quite what they looked like on the surface, and just kind of now is a little long in the tooth, but still plays around at the edges and can be useful under some circumstances to be tasked to do certain things.
Don't even get started.
If you get my drift. Yeah, it's like, so that's why you keep. That's why agents keep guys like that around, because they're savvy enough that you can say, "Hey, can you go do this for me?" And they say, "Yeah, that sounds like fun."
Let me ask this way. Assuming we have, and we have, we've looked at a number of reasons why Danchenko, after his initial claim about the phone call, would then be asked over the course of an entire year again and again and again and again about that phone call, new agents and so on, as we discussed. Now, let's look at it from Durham's perspective. Why would Durham charge it 4 times?
I got to say this. I haven't read it closely enough. I was reading through the narrative, and when I got to the counts, I didn't pay that much attention to what the actual charging language in the counts was, except the first thing I looked at is, are they all Eastern District of Virginia counts? And they were. And he could have charged the District of Columbia in the Eastern District of Virginia, and then you have a venue issue, and the defendant can always waive the venue issue. And that would have said to me that Danchenko's already agreed to plead guilty, and he's going to waive venue, and that's why Durham put them both in there. These are all just kind of mechanical things that can be made to go away. I haven't looked at the specifics of how he charged each of the 4 counts. I thought it was 5. That tells you how close I looked at it.
No, you're right. So the first one is in relation to this Charles Dolan fellow.
Okay, all right.
Forget about that one, okay? 2, I had a very close look at them. Very, very close. 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the identical lie told over and over and over and over again between March and November of 2017. So, of course, you can charge a lie that's told at different times again and again. Right. That's absolutely fine. Cool. But what might be the tactics behind that?
Well, that could be that, the specifics of the words he used or the questions that he was asked and responded to were different each time. And it might be that it's stronger in one instance than in another instance, that he might have had some equivocation in his answer in one of the 4 instances. So it's a little bit of a weaker play. So you charge all 4 of them out of recognition that maybe 2 of them are better than the other 2 of them. But, you want 4 chances for the jury to say guilty, because you're not confident they'll say guilty to all 4 because of the factual particulars of each circumstance. It's hard to know without having the discovery. where you can see from the discovery how the FBI wrote the 302 about what he was asked and what he responded.
Yeah, no,
Hans?
thanks for that.
Hans?
What about the idea of him being recorded clandestinely? So in January, that was not the case, but after January, it keeps saying that he was recorded without his knowledge. Can we read anything into that?
I think that somebody figured out that he is not being square, and he's probably a subject or a target at that point. Now, I've said over and over again that when Mueller took over, from my point of view, the special counsel's office ran from the Steele dossier once they kind of had a good look at it. I don't see where their footprints or fingerprints are anywhere going in any direction based on the Steele dossier. That would have included Danchenko. I just think that's the Mueller prosecutors, who are a pretty savvy crew, got in that and said, this is a mess. We can't use this for anything. And whereas, up to that point, remember, up to the Mueller group coming in, this was basically just an all FBI operation. I can't find anything that says there was a lot of DOJ oversight. Yeah, Loftman was in the interview because he wrote the proffer letter for Danchenko, and the FBI agents can't write proffer letters, only the prosecutors can, so they needed him for that. But by and large, in this kind of investigation, and until it turns overtly criminal, the FBI is working on their own, and they're using idiots like Kleinsmith for their legal advice.
Hans? Hey, Hans?
I'm here.
Yeah. Interesting. You raise an interesting issue. Right. Why does Durham, I mean, obviously it's to make it a little harder on Danchenko, but why does he underscore the fact that Danchenko lies to the FBI 4 times and the FBI does nothing about it? Not Mueller, not the FBI. They do nothing about it. He lies to them 4 times successively, and they do nothing about it.
No, you're absolutely right. My theory on this is that Durham. I mean, I agree with Ship. I mean, it just might be like tactical. Let's make sure we get him on one of those. But I think it goes beyond that. I think it's because that particular lie. So that means 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the indictment. That particular lie goes to the heart of the entire case. Because what is that lie? That lie is that he lied about having spoken to Millian. So he lied about that. And that gets repeated 4 times. Why is that so important? Well, because Millian is supposedly the source of everything. He's the source of the grand conspiracy, that language. He's the source of the P-tape. Supposedly he's the source of the Alpha Bank. And he's the source of WikiLeaks. So all 4 big issues, Millian is the source. And so that of course goes further, right? Because why would Steele make someone who Danchenko never met and had to make up some lie about a phone call, which is what those 4 lies are about? Why would Steele make that person the sort of the centerpiece of his entire dossier? Well, he would only make that person the centerpiece of an entire dossier if he thought, and this is Svetlana's point, which she's been making for years and years and years, if he thought that Danchenko and Millian were in the same room at the same time at some point in time, because then you can make up whatever. He said, right? The beautiful thing about this entire thing is that, and Sergei is really, really lucky here, right? He was so wise as to just ignore all these outreaches from Danchenko. So he was never in the same room with these people, with Danchenko or with anyone else. And that kind of blows up the entire dossier. So I think probably, in my view, that's the reason why Durham goes on and on and on 4 times about the same issue.
Well, and I would add that Millian is important because he's known well enough that the information allegedly coming from him has a veneer of plausibility, as opposed to sub source 1, who's some girl he knew from his childhood, in Russia. and the other ne'er-do-well characters that were the other subsources. Million's not in that class. If this information really came from a guy like Million, then the chances of that information being solid go up dramatically. And so he created a fantastic story based upon somebody who would be credible if they offered that kind of information.
And also, Million is the source of like Tom's was saying, the extensive conspiracy that led to the Russian hacking and the dump to WikiLeaks. That's the treasonous shit, and that's why he's sort of important, and that's why it's great that it's actually debunked today.
Ship is absolutely right. The Million is the only one. Well, first of all, they have a photo of Million and Trump. This was back in 2008. It is a fact that Sergey, who was a realtor, an American citizen who was a realtor, that's a normal thing, right? He happened to have sold Trump apartments down in Florida. Well, that's a normal thing. That happens. But that was enough for the Steele crowd to run with it, because you've got someone who you not only can connect to Trump, you even got a photo of him and Trump. So then you can make up all kinds of shit. And that's why he was so important. But what I think is that Steele actually believed that Danchenko had Million in the same room. So at that point, you can make up whatever you want to make up. That's the point. And the beautiful thing about this whole story is that Sergey can prove that he was never in the same room with any of these people. And the beautiful thing about today's indictment is that Durham can prove that Million was never on the phone with any of these people either, because that's what it says. And, that's the part that Danchenko made up as a sort of a last attempt to sort of make it work somehow. I never met the guy, but he phoned me. And of course, that was bullshit. Durham was able to prove that very easily, as you could, when you look at phone records and so on. For some strange reason, the FBI never, ever looked into that aspect.
I think they were waived off of it. I think they were waived off of it. They were told, if you go down that road, that unlocks Steele. If you unlock Steele, you're going to start looking at Fusion GPS. Then you're going to start looking at Simpson. That's going to take you into Perkins Coie. And so it's like, where would the grand jury subpoenas stop if they went that direction? And so somewhere in the Democratic establishment, a signal was given that let's look at Russian active measures and Concord catering instead. Because in the summertime, when the special counsel's office is just getting up and running, and they're getting their own 40 FBI agents. They didn't just take over who was already operating. They kept some and got rid of some, but they got their own little crew of FBI agents, and they got their offices and they got their computers. And so between May and June, they were getting staffed up and getting off and running. The first thing they did is go knock over Manafort's house and storage unit. And the reason they did that, I don't think this is maybe well enough known. The Manafort case had existed since 2014. It was a grand jury investigation. They could immediately get grand jury subpoenas, and behind the grand jury subpoenas, immediately get search warrants on Manafort. It was quick, it was easy, it was direct. They already knew.
They did. That investigation was closed, and I think it's like reopening in January 2015
exactly.
or something like that.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether it was closed. They knew they could reopen it and go right after it. And Weissman and a couple others who were recent alums of justice knew it was there. They knew they could immediately make access of it, and immediately go to the grand jury and get what they needed. They may have known that there was already PC for a search warrant. All they had to do was put it on paper. They knew Papadopoulos was a dry hole. They knew that wasn't going anywhere. The FBI had already figured that out. So that was a zero. They knew by the summer of 2017 that the Page FISA had turned up nothing. They had 9 months of Page FISA material. If the FBI hadn't found anything in the Page FISA material in 9 months, they weren't going to find anything. So they knew that was a dry hole. So what did they wheel to? They wheeled to Flynn, who the FBI had already closed out. In the spring, the FBI had said, there's nothing there. We're closing that out. that after January of 2017. Okay.
Well, they wanted to even before that.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you? I'm sorry. Ship. Can you go back through that chronology again, please?
Okay. Mueller takes over in the middle of May, but you're going to have a lag period while they're getting staffed up and they're trying to figure out what the FBI knows. There's time there. I mean, the FBI's been at that now for 11 months, right? At least, July of 2016, the FBI starts. Mueller takes over in the middle of May 2017. A couple of people come on board right away. They have to go recruit, others, or bringing them out of private practice. They grab a few bodies out of Main Justice that are well connected. The FBI, brings over a whole new squad of 40 agents, and they've got 5 targets, and the fifth target is who is that? The Middle Eastern guy that they quickly tossed out. I've actually talked to him a couple of times.
Walid
Farris.
Yeah, Walid Farris. He was 5. He was number 5. But that was a dead end. So they've got the 4 targets, which are the 4 Crossfire Hurricane targets. But they can immediately know that Papadopoulos is nothing because the FBI has looked at him for a year. But they twist him with a charge. They basically get him hung up on a false statement charge, and so they got leverage over him. But he's not taking them anywhere. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anybody. Nobody knows him. The Flynn case, the FBI had wanted to close that in the spring, even after January. There was a non-pros. They were not referring Flynn for prosecution to DOJ based upon the January interview. They wanted to close that out, and it was a special counsel's office that said no, we want to look at that. You have Manafort. They immediately went right for Manafort, probably because they knew there was PC there. They just had to put it on paper and get the search warrants, which was within 30 days they had them. I think what was that? It was July 30th they kicked in the door, so maybe 45 days they had Manafort, the search warrants. And so who are we missing? Flynn, Page, Papadopoulos, and Manafort. And now, as is common, I have completely lost where the hell I was going with all this. You should see me in front of a jury. I
don't remember where we were at.
Yeah,
what was the question again?
We were talking about the SEO. Yeah, can you read that back, please?
No. My question was about chronology. You said that they dug dry holes on different people, and that's when they went to Flynn. So I just want to get a sense of what your chronology is. I'm just trying to follow that. I'm sorry.
So Flynn basically is the last resort, But I think from the perspective of the SCO, if there was,
I'm sorry. What do you mean Flynn is the last resort? At what point?
Well, Page was a dry hole. If they're really looking for Russia stuff, presumably, at least out at the outset, they're looking for some actual Russian connection. They've looked at the Steele dossier and they know we're not going anywhere with this information. Okay, the Steele dossier is to me, if the Steele dossier is put down in front of me and they want me to do something with it, I'm laughing. This is nonsense. It was facially nonsensical. The only reason the Steele dossier got the play it did is because it fell into the hands of a few people who wanted it to be true. And I'm talking about the small Crossfire Hurricane team. They wanted it to be true. And they had 60 days until the election, from mid-August until November. I mean, if they didn't act within that time and Donald Trump won, that's the old, what's our insurance policy issue? Well, we're going to stop him. Remember all those conversations? Small group of people, they were terrified.
That's not that's not what the insurance policy was.
Well, Lee,
the insurance policy was not stopping Donald Trump. That's not what.
Well, what happened is in Svetlana talks about this a lot. In April, May, the stories about Svetlana start coming out, and in the news and the Guardian, shit like that. So and then Brennan comes up and he said I forget what the exact verbiage is. In that interview, he starts saying there's some traitor he's talking about Flynn, and that's when the Svetlana story really started popping out, and that's when they started re-upping this stuff.
Yeah, but I think that I could be wrong, and I read the Svetlana stuff very carefully at the time. That all just struck me as sort of a dirty trick payback. They were just trying to make Flynn unemployable by the Trump campaign, or in the spring, nobody was thinking about a Trump administration. In the spring, nobody
No,
was thinking
yeah,
about Trump.
but I'm talking about 2017 when that actually, once it started getting past, because I mean, I've heard from sources that they're about to shut down the entire Russia thing, and then all of a sudden their get out of jail free card to keep on investigating was like in May or whatever, and Brennan starts talking about this traitor that was involved with Russia or whatever. That's when these stories about Svetlana started coming out in January 2017 or May 2017, I believe. And it's about Flynn and her, because it wasn't in public at that time. But then Brennan started talking about it in his hearing. I forget, with the sissy or whoever it was.
Well, I think in that time frame there were still people wanting to prosecute Flynn. Okay, the FBI was not on board with prosecuting Flynn in April or May of 2017. In fact, I mean, you get that from Barnett, the case agent. He was the one that tried to close it in December, and then he didn't get invited to the party to interview Flynn. He was excluded from that. And then, they get the interview, but it's done by Pietka and Strzok, two guys who probably haven't actually interviewed anybody in years, because they're kind of beyond that level in their work. And, and you can see how that plays itself out with their 302. The idea that Peter Strzok, an assistant, what the hell?
He's a dad, but with
deputy assistant director is typing a 302. That's just like comical.
But Chip, we're talking about how it just kept on getting pushed forward, because at the time it was all these other things are sort of shut down. But once Brennan came forward and he started saying there was like this treasonous aspect in these hearings, and he was talking about Flynn at that point.
Right.
And then all these stories came out about Svetlana and him, and they're like, "Oh, what is going on here?" And that's what sort of pushed it again into this.
That story. That story. I mean, she's still on here. Come on. I don't remember.
Yeah, she's here.
What that story was out there before, not necessarily in public, but the FBI had it because they got it from Halper, and it was a false story when Halper gave it to him.
Right, but it was bigger when Brennan started giving it credence in a congressional testimony.
Oh, okay. Okay. I that doesn't come back to me right now as but I mean, it would make sense because Brennan's got my point of view on Brennan has always been he lost his next 4 years as the CIA director because Clinton would have kept him on, and so when Clinton loses, he loses his dream job, and now he's out on the street, and he's just a bitter, mean, not very bright man.
Ugly too.
Yeah, he's just going to talk shit about everybody at that point.
I don't know if Svetlana wanted to say anything, but
well, I can. Yes, thank you. So there are a number of stages in all of it. Thanks, Mr. Nelson. I never call you fool at the moment. Too clever for that. So the first stage, if we're talking about, basically we need to remember that January is when Flynn is about to become officially, in charge, the NSA. And they are closing on him, but then they can't close on him because they have this meeting between Obama and the famous 7th floor. So the decision is actually at the top of the FBI, comes from the 7th floor. So that's Comey and McCabe, who just met with Obama, to keep the investigation open. Despite the fact that they know that it's all bullshit, they have to keep the investigation open. We're talking about January 2017, because Flynn is about to become, the spy chief. Then and basically find out everything they've done and become very powerful. So they need to destroy him. And they go back. This is where Peter Strzok sends this famous text message saying that our incompetency saves us, where he basically orders, from the orders from McCabe and Comey down to Barnett and others to keep to keep the investigation open. And then in February and March, they proceed to obtain national security letters. So they can't obtain FISAs on Flynn, because for that they would have to tell the FBI that the national security advisor is a Russian agent. They can't do that. So they don't obtain FISAs, instead of which they obtain NSLs. And they obtain a number of them between February and March. And actually, Kleinsmith, who's actually quite a senior guy, he's the one in charge of putting those together. We're talking about 2017. So by that stage, they know for nearly a year that the Flynn story is bullshit, but they do that anyway. And that coincides, the obtaining of the NSLs. It coincides with first stories about me in the various newspapers, which in turn also coincides with the testimonies. So the first one is Comey, and they basically are sort of coordinating that all, because Flynn is the most important person for them. First of all, because they need to get rid of him, which they do, he resigns. And second is because he's the most important person for Trump. So there we're moving on to trying to get rid of Trump through two ways. One is the competence, which is that he put national security advisor position a traitor, and that's what I think Fools was referring to. And the second thing is obstruction. So they want Trump to basically say something or do something to stop investigating Flynn. And that's where I think we're going into the testimony. So we have Comey, Brennan, Clapper, others, all basically saying things about Flynn in order to create this, although they know for sure privately that there is nothing to the Flynn is not a traitor, but publicly they're making all the statements. And that's one of the reasons why Mueller investigation comes across. So basically it's a very, very serious op, which is post the election, is actually then designed to get Trump through getting Flynn.
The other event in February that's relevant to this is there's a big article in New York Times in mid-February about the repeated communications between Trump campaign and Russian intel. Remember that one?
Yep, and I remember Peter Strzok's notes about it as well.
And I'm 100% convinced that that's the recycling of the Alpha Bank story, so that when Strzok, when they say that the Alpha Bank story didn't matter, well, that February story really inflamed the Congress. I mean, there were at that point they were up to about 20 senators demanding a special counsel based on that one false story.
Well, the other thing that happened in I think it was February, which in my view maybe did more to launch this whole thing, or at least prevent it from being shut down when it should have been and could have been, was Sessions recusing himself without establishing that there was a real need for him to recuse. Sessions should have stuck in there long enough to say, you want me to step aside and allow an investigation of the president to go forward, you're going to have to show me the evidence that says it's legitimate and it's bona fide. And if it doesn't stand up, I'm shutting it down, and I'll explain to the country why. And he didn't do that. He just said, oh, I need to step aside. Well, I guess I better step aside.
Yep, guaranteed. And that same thing with investigating Hillary Clinton or whatever. He just prematurely basically did that shit.
Yeah, he had an obligation. I mean, he had an obligation to his oath to say, I can't do this until I'm convinced there's a legitimate reason for me to do this. It just can't be because somebody else says I need to.
Yep.
Not only that there's a legitimate reason to even investigate anything.
Exactly.
It's like that sort of, it's like that old scenario where like you're asked to withdraw from some committee or some panel or whatever because a friend of yours has applied for a job, but that friend of yours hasn't actually applied for a job. I've seen that many times in real life. So, Sessions, the first thing he should have done before we even talk about Kislyak and all that stuff is like, Yeah, fine. Okay, so you say I need to recuse from this investigation. Before we talk about why I should recuse, what's your reason for investigating? Because
Exactly.
at that point, they didn't have one.
Exactly.
Yep.
And he would have sniffed that out, or at least a smart attorney general would have sniffed that. A smart attorney general with a good deputy, would have said, this doesn't add up.
I mean, 100%. He was just weak, and he didn't have a deputy, and he just felt like he was too politically involved. That's why Trump probably should have never appointed like a senator for that
Yep.
job.
Yep. He appointed, yeah. Imagine if Bill Barr was that attorney general.
It would have been.
Can anybody imagine Bill? Yeah. I mean, you needed somebody who was savvy and understood the ways of the world and not the Senate,
Yep.
which is, an institution and environment unto itself and operates like nothing else anywhere else.
Yep. But I mean, if Bill Barr would have came in earlier, we might not have known all this fucking bullshit. Who even knows? It's like a gift and a curse. But I'm going to bring on some of the. I know Johnny Dice has been waiting patiently for a long time, so.
All right, I'll be on for a little bit and then I'm probably out. But this has been great. I will participate enthusiastically if you put something like this together. I'm writing a story on the indictment right now. So
Awesome.
Great, nice to hear from all you guys. Nice to share the thoughts. This has been terrific.
Yeah, we'll share it out for sure, and keep fighting in the cases I know you're involved in. So, thanks, Ship.
All right. Great.
Yep. Johnny Dice, you there? Johnny Dice. Roll them dice.
Hello.
Hey, welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Once again, great stuff. I just have to say that for Durham, for me, I was an optimistic guy that faded to pessimist. Now I'm back to optimist, just because in the last two indictments, he really does lay out the Clinton campaign involvement, right? Now, if he does not throw Clinton people from the Clinton machine in handcuffs the next time around, I have to be shocked, right? Because is he not laying out that it's coming?
Well, I mean, I think you're making like a little bit of a fallacy there. I like to say that these are Clinton people, first of all. That's where we need to go first. That these are the Clinton campaign. That Danchenko and Sussman are the Clinton campaign. But like you're saying, is that he is definitely laying out an indictment, especially in the Sussman one, that he's going to go farther up in that chain. But I don't like. For me, I don't want to separate these people. These people are getting paid by the Clinton campaign. Guaranteed.
I guess that's the important point. I think that's the important point.
I think the narrative needs for narratives. We need to say that the Clinton campaign members are getting indicted, because that didn't happen with the Trump campaign. They didn't get indicted for anything they did during their situation with the Trump campaign in 2016. It was indicted for process crimes and stuff like for Manafort. Stuff that happened way before. This is the Clinton campaign getting indicted, and I feel like we should always just say Danchenko is a member of the Clinton campaign, and so is Sussman.
I guess my point being is, still there was money involved, right? So he's lying because he's getting paid. Same thing with Danchenko. But when you get down to the Clintons, right? They're lying to lie.
Yeah.
They're not lying for profit. And that's my point. That's why I think Durham is maybe going after these guys with these lying statements and not anything further. I mean, to butcher to the whole comedian, I forget his name. I'm sorry. Jesse Smollett, right?
Oh, Juicy.
Juicy
Smollett. That French
right?
comedian.
Exactly. So he lied to the Chicago Police Department and has been indicted. The Hillary campaign lied to the FBI. Why should they not be indicted?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That they have been indicted. They are the Hillary Clinton campaign. They're members of it. But it's going to go. That's what I'm saying. It's going to go up.
But they're paid
upward.
members. They're paid members, right? There was some financial gain that paid, right? You see the difference, right?
Not really.
Well,
what I'm saying is, paid or not, who gives a shit? They're members of the Hillary Clinton campaign. I know we want to go up further, right?
Listen,
and I think that's what Durham.
I'm not saying Hillary Clinton's going to be an orange jumpsuit. I don't think that. But if you get a few people in the higher ups, I'm happy. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think from the indictments we are already laying out a conspiracy with the people higher up. But I mean, like what Ship was saying, like you got to go through. This is the problem with Perkins Coie. You got to go through this attorney-client privilege thing to get to the Clinton campaign. And I think Durham's trying to get up there. Who knows how high it's going to get? But the Clinton campaign. This is what I'm trying to set the narrative. The Clinton campaign has already been indicted twice.
Yes, but my point being is not publicly. It won't happen publicly until one of them is indicted. Do you agree with that?
What I'm saying is we have to say it. I'm saying that all of us, when Lee Smith writes a story, he needs to say these are Clinton campaign members.
Yes.
When you talk about it, you say these are Clinton campaign members. I mean, they're never. I think we need to set that story straight, right?
Well, I totally agree, but my point being is the American public will not understand it until they were indicted for working with the campaign, the Clinton machine. Yeah,
but I mean, it's written in that stuff. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is the point of us. Like, we've already taken over a lot of the sort of information of space. And we just need to spread it out that, like, this is what happened.
No, but that's why I'm here. I'm here because I understand that. But for the majority of the people out there, it won't resonate until it happens in the news, you know? The real news.
Oh, for sure.
You know? It's not going to resonate until then. But I'm optimistic now because he's mentioned it twice in these two indictments. He didn't have to. He could have ignored it if he wanted to, Durham, but he put it in there. So I'm optimistic that Clinton indictments are coming. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming on. Walkafyre just texted me and he said he's still not on this thing. Yeah, thanks, Johnny Dice. I agree with you. I feel like it needs to go up farther than this. But
and Fools, I think a very important point here is that this is where I think Sussman's indictment is so huge, is that Perkins Coie were in charge of, what is it, $2 billion they raised. I was just reading the Fusion GPS book, and they're describing how they met up with, Mark Elias, who's a partner of Sussman, and Elias tells them money is not an object. That's because they raised $2 billion. That's literally from the Fusion GPS book, right? And I think when you're actually looking at Sussman with Elias controlling this $2 billion, that's a lot of money to buy the election, right? And then you have to have kind of understanding that, I think, which is very important, and that needs to be explained better to people. I think you're right, is that it's very rare that you kind of catch the person who orders the hit, right? So ordinarily you can catch someone who's the executor. So for example, like let's take, Danchenko or even Steele, right? They're the guys doing the dirty work. But the fact that the Durham team were able to catch the guy who orders, right, who puts people in place, who puts money in place to achieve a specific goal, that's like really, really rare. And I think that's the significance is Hillary Clinton lawyer, Hillary campaign lawyer in charge of the funding, in charge of the strategy on all levels have been caught in such a dramatic way. That's huge.
Yeah, I think Svetlana is absolutely right. The Sussman indictment is much huger if you look at it from the Hillary Clinton campaign side. That goes straight to her. That goes straight to, well, he was a Clinton campaign lawyer. Today's indictment, the Danchenko indictment, is kind of much bigger in terms of what that lie, the Danchenko lie and the Steele lie did in terms of ICA. ICA led to media led to Mueller, that whole thing, that whole dominoes kind of thing, starting to crumble. But I completely agree. If we're talking about Hillary and her involvement in getting to her, the Sussman one is a much bigger deal.
I agree with that too. Sorry, I'm trying to navigate some of this administrative shit because I lost Walkafyre. Damn it. But whatever. Mansour has been waiting. Should I bring him on? Oh yeah, I will. Come on, Mansour.
Hello.
Mansour! There he is.
Hi. This is just kind of some technical stuff that I thought about when reading this indictment. The 2 charges are actually the 5 charges that are split into 2 parts. The 2 lies, 4 of them, as people have noted, are about Sergei. And the other one is about, who's the guy, Dolan? Who, if my reading of this is correct, he seems almost like a primary subsource of Zone. He is reflected in all kinds of paragraphs in this indictment where Durham is basically tracing where certain information originated and flowed through, and who it flowed through, and how it flowed, and how it ended up in the dossier. And, whether you think they are important allegations or not, and whether they're true or false explicitly or not, I forget Durham's language. I think he says they are reflective of the underlying information. And so, anyway, what I think is interesting about this is that Durham goes through all kinds of paragraphs detailing certain information that the Dolan guy basically provided as a source for the dossier. And the first lie that Danchenko gets charged for is that he lied about where this information came from. So I think this is interesting because Danchenko's asking, he's providing a cover story for where the information actually came from. And with Milian, it's almost not quite the reverse, but he's lying about his failure. So with Dolan, he actually collected and harvested a decent amount of information. If you highlight the sheer amount that Durham covered, that Dolan provided to Danchenko, and Danchenko lied about the source of where it came from, that's all under the Dolan category, which I would call that's a successful collection of intelligence, quote unquote. Whereas with Milian, his goal there was again to create a bridge to Milian. We know he failed on creating the bridge, as we call it, or creating the connection to the in the room, as people like to call it. He failed there. Why? What's the motive? Hans keeps asking, what's the motive? Why would he keep lying about this thing? I think this is because it's his job. I don't think Steele's fooled by this guy, his employee. I think that this is part of Danchenko's job, is to cover for the true and what we see as a more nefarious source. Dolan's connected to the Clintons all the way up, as everyone is saying. So, of course, this source of legitimate, even like hearsay gossip information, it has to be covered. I don't think Danchenko's got everyone fooled about that. I think there's other information that Danchenko's covering for. But let's just go through some of the things just really quickly that the PR exec is responsible for. This June situation, which is really interesting to me because now, do we really know what is the true reason that Danchenko was even in Russia for his June trip? Was it because he was tasked by Steele, or was it all because of this setup for this June situation that was going on? So they get all of the June information, they're saying, from Dolan, including all of the so-called confirmation information in September at the hotels. Stuff in the Manafort memo, specific mentions of Kislyak and Kulagin, which is also really strange to me because Danchenko has purportedly his own connections to Kulagin. And he provides his own story for that. Again, so why is he providing, a cover for where even this just random information about Kulagin came from? I think there's just deeper stuff there. So I kind of look at it from like a sourcing element. And I think all this information coming from Dolan is really interesting. And hopefully, to me, if we see that Durham is starting to map where specific traces of information originated and ended up in the dossier, that he will continue, because I think there's lots of other sources that are still to be uncovered and explored.
Right, I think so. I mean, we're talking about, obviously, like you're saying, like who sent Danchenko to the June Moscow stuff. I mean, it could have been both or whatever. But I mean,
also,
whatever was sourced from Dolan doesn't seem that very much important to the entire conspiracy, right? In my opinion, from what I'm reading from the indictment, I feel like there's more to dig into there. That's why Durham's doing it, because he can flip Iggy to see who the hell came up with the actual juicy stuff.
well, definitely.
Then I think that's right, but you got Dolan lying to Danchenko about this GOP story.
Yeah.
That is a bit of a red flag. So yeah, maybe Dolan just tells him a lot of stories and Danchenko repeats those stories to Steele and so on, and maybe it's all a big coincidence. But the one about him lying to Danchenko about the GOP is just, it's just one of those where it makes me think that, maybe there's more to this. On top of that, you've got a whole narrative within the indictment that Danchenko lied to a whole bunch of people. They're not specified. It's just basically a whole bunch of people about the fact that he was working for Steele. So he told the FBI, no, I never told anyone I was working for Steele. Turns out he told a whole bunch of people he was working for Steele. So what are the chances he told Dolan? I mean, I would say extremely high, at least, sort of in a braggadocious way, like, oh, there's this guy in London and I work for him and I tell him stories and so on. I think Dolan would have known at least that much.
I thought that's actually detailed in there.
He knew.
Yeah, that's I think documented.
Yes, Dolan knew.
Hans, if I can ask a question, like, or any other lawyers, what will it take to go from what will it take to go from Danchenko to the FBI? What is your guys' sense of this?
My personal sense of it is that if Durham either has the authority or has the guts or whatever you want to call it to go after the FBI, he's got all he needs. Because Danchenko told the FBI a totally incredulous story in January of 2017. He said that all this stuff from Millian was based on this phone call, which came after the outreach on July 22nd. So whenever the phone call, which Durham says the phone call never happened, but let's assume the phone call happened, right? It would have been after July 22nd. There were already 2 dossier reports written by that time. That's a red line. That's it. That's game over. So the FBI knew the guy was lying, and they let the whole thing fly. And
Right.
so at that point, you just have to go after the FBI. You have to go after everyone in that room. They might say, total incompetence. We didn't understand what he was saying, whatever. Bullshit. You go after Laufman, who gave him the fucking deal. I mean, why did he give him the deal? The Queen for a Day deal. What was the reason behind that? You go after all of that. My hunch, again, as I said earlier, is that that's kind of out of bounds for Durham.
I guess that's why I'm asking about well, you raised this before. Like, why did they charge him for lying to the FBI over the same issue 4 times, which seems to underscore the FBI's, if not malfeasance, incompetence, right? So you think he's just trying to say that they were not honest players in this? Or you don't think there's any way for him to go? You don't think he's got a move to go after them, or what's your sense?
Yeah, my sense is he knows that, why is it that this Garland fellow, right? He was in front of Congress the other day and he said, "Oh yeah, we renewed his budget." I mean, if it was actually a special counsel in the sense of the word, like an independent guy, he wouldn't need Garland or Monaco to extend his budget. You remember on Twitter, all of us here were like sweating it out. Like, is he going to get his money? Is he going to be able to go on? That shouldn't be an issue if he was truly independent. So I don't think he is truly independent, and so there are certain boundaries, and I think the boundary is don't go after government actors. You got to whitewash for the FBI.
Wow. So then what's your sense of like what the what do the boundaries look like? Just like lower level Clinton, not lower level, right? I mean, Sussman is not lower level, but what's your sense of what's available to them? Yeah, what's your sense of who can they go after? Who's untouchable? How high do they have to go for someone to say, okay, you've had enough, we're calling this off?
I think it's public-private. It's very simple. You can go after Elias, you can go after Sussman, you can go after all these people who are private, but you cannot go after public, institutional, not FBI, not CIA.
I mean, Hillary Clinton is public right now,
Yeah,
right?
That's a really good point. She's kind of in the middle, right? She's sort of both public, both private. So I don't know what's up with her. Same for Sullivan, right? Jake Sullivan. He's kind of in the middle. And when all this happened, he was private. Now he's public. So I don't know.
Why would they name Sullivan? That was fascinating, though, right? Like, they don't name Sullivan, but they outline it's Palmieri, Sullivan, and Mook. Why do they go after those people? Like, you would think the Biden administration would like, okay, step back. You don't get to name the national security advisor or put him in the middle of this. So I thought that was very strange. Why would Durham even go there if those people are untouchable? Is he like, putting a fastball under someone's chin? Or what's the point of that?
I think he was testing his boundaries.
Interesting. And so you think he may have gotten pushed back since then and said, you can go after these people and these people, but not these people?
I don't know. I think any message that was sent to him would have been very subtle, which is why I still think that the the raid on Deripaska was not Durham. It was DOJ. It was the message.
Can I chime in? Hello? All
Sure.
right. Now, if Durham has his budget extended, why does he care? Isn't that like pre-game at that point?
Well, in my opinion, I don't think Durham actually cares. Like you're talking about this pushback. I don't think Durham gives a shit. Why? I don't understand why Durham would give a shit about any pushback or any sort of boundaries by the DOJ. I feel like he would just quit. Like, why would he's like a 70-year-old prosecutor? What does he have to lose? He would just quit. That's why I don't actually.
That's very interesting, right? What's he trying to hold on to? What's he worried about?
He doesn't.
Like, I don't need the right. I don't need the hassle. You're not going to pay me. I'll go into private practice or I'll retire.
Well,
I'll play wiffle ball with my grandkids.
Oh,
Who needs the hassle?
that sounds better than any of this. But like, that's why people always talk about that. It's just like, no, I don't think Durham took this job just to be like, yeah, I'm gonna. It's like what Bill Barr said, which I mean, Bill Barr is more political than Durham from what I've seen. What does Durham give a shit about any of these guys? I've always said that Durham's more powerful than Garland or any of these other players in the DOJ because he's actually a career prosecutor. He's been a prosecutor his entire life and a counselor to U.S. attorneys and whatever. He's actually like unlike Mueller, who went to FBI director and back and forth to political positions. Durham's actually a career prosecutor. He doesn't have anything to lose, so he can just retire. He can just resign whenever he wants. He can make a fool out of the administration whenever he wants. That's why he's so powerful. I think he can do whatever he wants. I don't think he gives a fuck about Monaco. I don't think he would give a fuck. He's in the DOJ in the grand scheme of things, he's more powerful than all these people who jump back and forth between the DOJ and political positions and whatever. So that's why they're afraid. They should be afraid of Durham because he has way more power in the DOJ than any of these people. Mueller really had the power until Bill Barr stepped in and said, Mueller, I'm dragging my balls across your face because I used to do that when I was Attorney General before.
I think
when I was your boss before.
I think another interesting point is that look at the behavior of Strzok, right? So he's been relatively quiet for a bit, and then in the last couple of weeks, so one before this indictment and one after, he suddenly gives us interviews, right? And what does he say? Well, we discussed what he said in today's interview to an extent. Actually, there was one interesting bit where he was basically talking about how there's so much unnecessary verbiage in the Durham indictments, which is, I think, what sort of Lee and Hans were sort of referring to, which is that it's not just about like specific individuals who are charged and with that specific charge, but it's a much bigger conspiracy. And Strzok is like, why do we need all of that? It's like, well, you know why you need all of that. People, start feeling the heat and maybe, cooperate or something. But the second thing is that there was a previous interview, I don't know if you guys listened, I think you did, some of you, about how he is going on about Strzok, is going on about confidential human sources. And there he goes on about how, so previously we were told, and in fact that's what was put in the FICE applications, that this FBI sources like gold standard, like they've been reliable, Halper, Steele, others, like they're like, gold standard. That's why we believe them, right? That's why we relied on them for investigation. That's why we relied on them for, surveillance applications. Well, what Strzok said in this interview with Lawfare the other day, about a week ago, I think, he's like, oh no, these confidential human sources, they're like bad guys. Like majority of them like are bad guys, they're like mafia guys, and anyone can just like walk in. And what can I do if I'm an FBI agent? Essentially, I have to like work with bad, unreliable, lying people. That's what I do, and it's a huge shift. And so I think from that perspective, it looks like Strzok is concerned about his position. I don't know whether that means that he would be gotten at or not, but he clearly feels that. And there's clearly this now this division, this finger pointed as to who, like, is it the fault of the FBI for accepting the evidence from the confidential human sources, which is what basically people like Steele would say, right? They would say, look, we just gave you the information, you took it, versus people like Strzok saying, no, we take any information because that's the nature of the confidential human sources. I mean, the reality, they're both at fault, right? Because of course, Steele lied and the FBI went and submitted this lies to court. But I think what that indicates, the behavior of Steele and the behavior of Strzok, indicates that there's definitely this concern, which is larger than what we've seen in terms of the indictment so far.
I think that's all of that is right. Coming back to the point of what Durham's up to, I love the guy for everything he's done, and don't get me wrong or whatever, but I'm a realist. Both of the past indictments, Sussman and today's indictment, Danchenko, both of them are replete all over the place of the FBI was duped, the FBI was duped, the FBI was duped, all over again and again.
Right.
So that's just a fact. We
Yep.
can't deny that fact.
Fascinating. I wonder, right? And we've all talked about this, that this was, Svetlana was out front on this before anyone else, saying this was their play. They were going to say Russian disinformation. This was their escape hatch. So how much are they setting this up for this escape hatch, Russian disinformation, or are they just giving, is Durham just playing nice with the FBI now, saying like, we've got you guys in a lot of stuff. You should come forward because we have you on all these different things. If you think it's just about Danchenko and Sussman, you're in big trouble because we know everything you did and we know everything you said. So enough. We know that, for instance, there is nothing in the indictment about Danchenko being a Russian spy, right?
That was actually a surprise to me. I thought I was
Yeah.
I was all prepared for sort of a bitter kind of for the thing
me
to be
too.
total sort of Lindsey Graham gaslighting thing, that he lied somewhere about his contacts with Russian intelligence agents and that he was charged on things that had nothing to do with the main plot. So, but the fact that they went straight down the throat of the million lies, I think is encouraging.
And I also think another thing
is
that, sorry, just to answer Liz's point, is I think that one has to differentiate between the FBI as an organization, as an institution, right, and the individuals. So when they're saying that, the FBI was forced to, waste their time, the FBI were deceived, etc. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the guys who did these things at the FBI, right, they get off the hook. It doesn't mean that. It means that the institution as a whole has been, duped. So basically, for lack of a better, simpler explanation, you guys pay your taxes, the FBI wastes your money, right, on chasing some things they shouldn't have chased, and in the meantime, missing things, right? And that's what I think this indictments, my understanding, from reading them, then they're meant to stress that you shouldn't lie to the institution, right, of the FBI. That doesn't mean that the individuals within the FBI, for example, let's say Strzok, who is obviously behaving very strangely, or for example, Steven Sommer, who's already been, highlighted as, quite significant sort of abuser, or for that matter, Kleinsmith, who people say, oh, he was just a junior guy. No, he was a very senior lawyer and he had, a lot of stuff to do. So I don't think that necessarily gets off people like Strzok. That obviously we'll see the end of it, right? But I think the message is that you cannot lie to the FBI. You should not deceive the FBI, which does not mean that the individuals within the organization necessarily will get away with it.
Yeah. Well, just one comment again, which on the focus, one of the things that they leave out of the indictment is that the much more serious consequence of the lies was not so much that, the FBI wastes its time, but the FBI wastes its time all the time. But the damage, the false intel assessment, that's really serious, I think, because it changes national policy for years and creates unnecessary risks, and that gets kind of just swept under the table by the focus on the criminal process. And I mean, I'm a bit of a tired record on focusing on the ICA. I mean, Hans and I talk about this endlessly, but that, you really wish that there would be some process of just evaluating that as a catastrophic intel failure, and that the people in the DNI and CIA are held out in the sunshine, even if they didn't do anything criminal, but just that they did something stupid.
Well, while we've been on here chatting, I see in DMs that Lindsay's been on Fox News telling them that Igor is a Russian spy, and that the FBI, just kind of ignored that fact or overlooked that fact. So that's the narrative, and that's what Durham's up against. So he's up against the Democrats, obviously, but he's also up against Lindsay and his crowd, and that's that's really tough for him. So I think I just said that he hasn't gone after the FBI. He keeps saying that the FBI was duped. I agree with Svetlana. It's a very smart strategy because he talks about the institution, not about the individuals or whatever. I think he's probably just trying to do the piecemeal thing. He's just sort of inching away at it, trying to see how far he can get.
I don't know if I don't mean to make fun of Lindsey Graham, but I don't know if Lindsey Graham is like a real barrier for Durham getting through. I mean, I think that Lindsey Graham is probably messaging on a whole bunch of different people for a whole bunch of different people, and unfortunately, there are different Fox figures who appear to be doing that as well. So, but I don't think that would hold up Durham. I think that, Hans, I agree with you. I think there might be a whole many different things that are holding up Durham, but it strikes me that Lindsey Graham would not be one of them.
And I just want
I think that's a good point.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think where Hans although is right is obviously the fact how much air they give to all these people who just say those things. And for example, this topic about Russian disinformation, which I think basically what Hans is referring to, and I think this used to be a favorite topic between me and Lee in the old days when people were seriously considering it, is that we remember that David Ignatius in that infamous article, where the Flynn, tapes were leaked, etc. He already pre-prepared the ground, years before everyone else, was prepared to say that still stuff is a bunch of lies. Ignatius already prepared the Russian disinformation as a way out, right? Because they planned that kind of thing. And so luckily, I agree with, Stephen, thankfully, this doesn't seem to be really the main message. And hopefully, people like Graham won't get in the way of the public understanding of what these things mean. But also coming back to Stephen on his point about intelligence failures. I mean, exactly. I think the ICA is a huge problem because they portrayed it as this, the intelligence community assessment, the 17th agency, etc., etc. So they definitely need to sort this out for people to have faith in the DNI. I think another thing on that subject is, of course, an assessment and indictment. We've seen how the government data that was being, given to this internet company as a contractor for the government, for the things, protecting, the public, keeping us safe. It was being used and abused against, Trump, campaign people for political purposes, right? And I think that's what a big chunk of Sussman's indictment, which I think people will come to realize, is just how horrific it is that the DOD data and other data, which wasn't public, right? And that's obviously a huge breach. It's a huge breach of security, and obviously something needs to be done about this outside contractors and people like Yofi, but also these internet companies having access to this government data and then abusing it.
One of the odd things about the DNS data that is a coincidence that sticks in my craw is that the DNS hits start on the same day that CrowdStrike arrives on the scene. And I mean, I don't, I mean, I believe it's a coincidence, but it's sure a dig here coincidence. And I mean, there are many issues in relation to the DNC hack itself, which we haven't talked about tonight, that remain, a loose end. The explanations by the FBI of the attribution are not nearly as professional as one would expect in a big case like this. And it's just odd that it's as unprofessional as just that the attribution isn't as tight in terms of evidence as it ought to be. It relies mostly on assertion and reassertion in an increasingly louder voice. And the odd thing about but nobody could really figure out, and I would say I still don't have any strong theories on it, but we do have this odd situation where Joff and his crowd are certainly capable of mounting some kind of operation to create a false flag with the DNC, with the Guccifer 2. And, whether they did or not, it's a completely different thing. But there's a lot of loose ends there yet to, and the Joff just gives new names and that are suspicious.
And I even have like whistleblowers coming to me saying that Jaffe was involved with the attribution to the DNC. And I mean, like you were saying, like if you read any of the other like pretty decent indictments of like the Yahoo hack with Dokuchayev and all those other guys, it's way more detailed on how they attribute that to Baratov and the Yahoo and all that stuff. But didn't seem like Mueller went into that big of a detail because I think he actually gained it from foreign intelligence. So we'll see about that. I know Murray's been waiting for a bit. What's up, Murray? Rothbard?
Hey guys, appreciate the opportunity to chat. I think this is a really cool thing that you're doing. I haven't been here since the very beginning, but yeah, I just wanted to pop in with a couple of comments. Really quick one, Hans, you guys and Lee were talking about what do we think, Durham can actually do? Who can he go after, public versus private? I think that's a good line in the sand to draw. That's kind of how I see it, Hans. One of the recent pieces of news that I thought was interesting as these indictments started to roll out was the DOJ clearing Andy McCabe and reinstating his pension after he had lost it when he had been fired by Sessions. And I don't know if personally, if that's the DOJ's way of kind of fighting back against Durham or maybe testing Durham to see, how broad his investigation and his indictments are. I don't think we'd all love to see it rolled up, to the top. But I think there's so many players, the web is so deep that for him to actually expose the extent of what happened, not only after Trump's election, but, far before, reaching back into like 2015, the repercussions are so devastating that I think they're going to do, whether it's Durham or the government, they're going to do everything in their power, right, to make sure that he doesn't do that. And I'm not sure that he or anybody is willing to go that far, just because of what it would entail. That's why my expectations are tempered. I like seeing what we've uncovered in the last couple of weeks with Sussman, obviously, and Danchenko, but I'm trying to keep my expectations tempered, but wanted to see if you guys had any thoughts on kind of the DOJ's recent decision to reinstate McCabe in the midst of everything that's going on right now.
Yeah. So, hey, everyone, this is Walkafyre. I got knocked off somehow. I'm not sure. And couldn't get back on. So I'm now under my new Twitter handle for at least this Spaces. But the reason I was searching for something when I got knocked off, and I think it applies right here to your comment. I was trying to pull up Barr's actual appointment of Durham to pull up the final paragraph in it where he says, Durham should submit a confidential report, and also any interim reports to the extent possible for public dissemination. And I wonder with these speaking indictments with Sussman, with Danchenko, how much that he is actually able to dig into and indict some of these people versus how much is this just his quote unquote interim reports. Look, I can't indict these people. I can't dig into some of these ultra classified issues or something like that. And this is his only way of getting some of this out. And, it's a kind of a depressing way to look at it, that maybe a lot of these folks might not get rolled up and actually face indictment.
Limitations is going to come into play there. I hate to interrupt, but I think the statute of limitations will come into play.
And I could agree, and it's unfortunate, and at least this way it is getting out there. It's public. And then you've got the researchers on here that will identify these people and push that as far as possible. I would still think that we will get some sort of report at the end, or at least some more indictments. But I think this might be Durham's way of fighting back, as Murray is saying, against this DOJ, of saying, look, fine, I can't issue a report about all this stuff, or I can't get indictments on certain people, but I can at least do a 39-page 1001 indictment and get some of the story out there, and at least continue pushing everything forward, just like what we're doing here, just like what we do every day. Of the more that gets exposed, the more they can't hide anymore. And so this is his way of continuing to get pieces out there. And whether Jaffe goes down, or whether there's something more that we don't know, or that he can't tell us, or that who knows. So every single time one of these comes out, I'm just grateful for the extra information, and then we can dig in and learn as much more as we can.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree. I'm grateful for this too, but I think I have some of the same concerns as you do, because when I see these long indictments coming out, while I'm hopeful, I also feel like, well, is this guy just trying to put out information and effectively declassify as much stuff as he can before something is stopped?
Exactly. Sussman, they've got to declassify a bunch of stuff in order to turn it over to Sussman for his, as part of his defense. So that might be a way to open things up for FOIA or something like that we can eventually get.
Yeah.
But back to Murray's point, back to McCabe, at the time point we're kind of at now, the big thing that McCabe was involved in, besides potentially sort of the Flynn interview, when he actually sort of sent out the investigation into Trump over the firing of Comey over the obstruction of justice, that's kind of the big thing that I'm looking at regarding McCabe, because that was an obvious, completely illegal investigation. I don't know if you can actually find an illegality out of it, but if there's something that he was communicating with other people saying, like, all right, fuck Trump, I'm going to start this obstruction of justice investigation right now, that's what I'm looking at. And that we have tons of time with that, but who knows?
McCabe, Matt, remember, McCabe and I believe it's Lisa Page, they're meeting with Bruce Orr sometime in August after he's speaking, after he and his wife are meeting with Steele. I think that McCabe is involved in a lot of different things. That's always been my understanding, that that it could go very high with McCabe. It was unclear how much higher it would go at the FBI after McCabe, but that it looked like McCabe was involved in a whole bunch of different things. Certainly we all know McCabe was asking for the dossier for months, right? He knew it was there, and he was asking for it. I
But
think
the hard part with McCabe will be showing, but that he had a color of right, or a color of justification in terms of a legal reason for doing things. It's not as easy to pin a crime on him as people think. I don't think.
Right.
you're probably
Right.
right. You're probably right. I'm just saying he's there fairly early.
Right.
No,
Right.
It's
that,
not
So,
just
Steve,
it's not just May 2017.
Steve, that's what I'm
but
saying
this ties back
about
in.
the starting of the obstruction of justice investigation. If he has a sort of a malicious and reason to start that, and he told other people, I know Durham's going to want to understand why the hell McCabe was like, why did you start this investigation into Trump? And if other people are going to flip on him, that could be something to investigate. But he probably covered his bases, but we'll see about that.
He'll have like when Bill Barr was writing his memo about sort of somebody doing something that they were legally entitled to do, even though they possibly had a bad reason for wanting to do it, but that as long as they had a valid reason for doing it, you couldn't really dig into their state of mind, and that there was a relatively new amendment to the Obstruction Act, which came in Sarbanes-Oxley, that had some, there are constitutional questions about it, and so much of Barr's reason for getting involved was that Trump had to guard against the reason that Trump was prohibited from doing something he was legally entitled to do because he may have had a bad reason for doing it as well as a good reason. And so the same thing applies with McCabe. So as long as he had a color of right for his actions, that the fact that he had a bad reason as well, I don't think that's he has a defense to any charge.
No, I don't think that's a unitary executive as a president saying that I control the entire executive branch. That if something is fucking up my duty as the president, I can shut it down. Whereas McCabe is the FBI director, where he can only say that he can't say that it's fucking up my duty as an executive.
But forget about all that. I mean, forget about all these esoteric points about McCabe. There's Murray's point is really well taken, and that's, to be honest, is the only relevant point here. McCabe had an ongoing lawsuit against DOJ that could have dragged on. Look at Carter Page's case. They still haven't even gone to discovery because they keep dragging out. You can play a gazillion tricks. They didn't do that. They chose to settle exactly after the Sussman indictment, and that was a message to Durham.
Makes sense.
Well, what's interesting is that when Garland was asked about that, he was kind of playing the silly buggers, which is that he was sort of saying that, oh no, it wasn't about, that case where he lied and leaked. And it was basically that, that he wasn't indicted for that, or despite the Horowitz recommendation, he wasn't prosecuted under the previous regime, therefore we have nothing to do with it. Whereas this was simply to do with some sort of delays about him him not being given some documents on time. So some technical BS, right? Okay. But what Garland didn't explain is, so he was trying to say that basically it was cheaper for them to pay him off, which is also BS, right? But whatever. But what he completely omitted to explain is why they also then expunge his records, right? Because that's the bit that I'm shocked about, to be honest. Because I'm hoping that if there is, for the investigator, purposes, maybe you can't expunge the letters, but anyway, that was part of the settlement, is that you expunge his records. So that's that. And then the second point is we have this whistleblower, right, Barnett, who was this FBI agent in charge of the Flynn case. And he did say that the Flynn investigation was driven by Barnett even after it was already decided that that the Flynn case should be closed. So recall that we already discussed that in early January, the Flynn case was supposed to be closed, and Barnett wrote up the closing memo, and then there was an order from the 7th floor, which is Comey and McCabe, to keep the investigation open, and then they started going after Flynn's records through the national security letters, etc. Barnett tells us that wasn't direct orders from McCabe. And there's no possible good reason why you'd be doing that other than that, he was basically going after Flynn. And then there's this unfortunate episode where McCabe goes to Pence and is trying to persuade Pence that Flynn, is a really bad guy, and basically trying to persuade, Pence that Flynn is in fact a traitor. So McCabe clearly had a huge role in terms of overseeing the very important aspects of investigations, such as Flynn. The question then is, absent him keeping records, absent him sort of other people, having, obviously we have Barnett's testimony and text messages, but doesn't he still have a responsibility anyway as a deputy director of the FBI, even if you sort of can't find him writing, I want to get Flynn, or I want to get Trump, and let's do something illegal. But doesn't he ultimately have a responsibility as a second most important person at the FBI for things that took place under his command?
But that's a job related issue, not a criminal issue.
Yeah, I think so too. There's a lot.
So the things.
There's a lot of filtering upwards and sort of passing off the buck to whatever supervisor and whatnot. Thanks, Murray, for that question. Chris King.
Wow, you guys are amazing. I love all of you. You guys are incredible. I can't believe you let me speak, but I just want to say we should take a vote on Shipwrecked Crew, because I think it's totally possible that he's a plant. I mean, it's worth having him around, maybe because he's a good plays devil's advocate, but come on. I mean,
I like Ship. I fight with him, but I like him.
No, yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think Ship's a good guy, and he wants to sort of,
and he knows stuff.
I co-sign. I think he's a jerk.
The inner workings of the DOJ and stuff or whatever, but yeah.
All right. And the only other thing I was going to ask was just, I think I might be mischaracterizing people here. I'm about 8 in the tank, and I started about 5 hours ago, so I'll just admit that right now. But Stephen, I believe, said that there was nothing new we learned from the indictment today, but I think Hans Monkey said that there was a lot we learned from it. So I just want to know.
Oh no! I said in respect to the Danchenko million count, the PR executive thing, and Dolan. That's all brand new.
Okay, thank you.
It was there was a couple of small chronological things in the Danchenko million count, but literally if you'd taken what our working notes were as at the end of July, they could have written the indictment up on those 4 counts or those counts pretty much from our notes there. We didn't know about the further interviews in later in 2007. So that's new, and that Danchenko repeated the lies. But the fact that we did know about the lies in January, March, and May, and in terms of we knew that, and in terms of the documents that he presented in respect to Danchenko, like the emails, we already had those.
Okay, and I'll just say, if you don't mind, I mean, this seems like what Durham does. I mean, he's not afraid to go after FBI people, it seems. and this is the only life that he knows for sure he's going to get. And this is what he does, and he's going to go as long as he can. And I think that the only person that can stop him is the AG or the president. So I'm not discouraged.
Great.
Can I chime in for a second? Hello? Anybody there?
Yeah.
Can I have a minute?
Johnny,
Is
go
it all
ahead.
right?
Go ahead, Johnny.
I just wanted to say a little bit about Ship. I've been following him for a while, and I learn a lot from the guy. I don't agree with everything he says, but I do learn a lot from the guy. And when he talked about a little bit earlier about like sending one agent to do a job for another agent that was already on the job, that rings true to me because I've worked with government, and that's the way government works. They don't differentiate things, even though they should, right? Like if you're talking about like a guy that is running for president, right? You would think government should treat it differently. Am I right? Right? But they almost don't. And that's the shame of the deep state. So my point being is there's a little truth and fiction in what Ship has to say. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got cut off for pretty much the entire comment from Johnny. My internet has been fucking up, but Steve, you can probably comment. Looks like you're ready.
Yeah, I agree that. Look, I think let's stop any of the discussion about Ship. I think he's just fine. He has knowledge that none of the rest of us has. He'll engage on he'll agree that we know some details of it that he doesn't, but he knows the law of it better than us. And we should just, in terms of how the FBI operates and the vagaries and stupidities that they have, I believe him on that, and I think we should just listen to it. So, but let's just go. Let's just listen to that.
Well,
on top, but in terms of the facts, I mean, there are 6 or 7 guys here that know the details of the case better than Ship. So, we'll argue with him on those things because we do know the facts better than him. But in terms of the procedures, we don't.
I agree with that too. I mean, from listening to him in the spaces today, I mean, he definitely wasn't sucking up too much to the FBI, but he was trying to explain how it might work. But it's obvious he doesn't know the details as much as us. So there's sort of a disconnect there. But I don't really see him as any type of enemy towards us. I think he's more of a devil's advocate.
No, I don't want to describe him as an enemy. I think he's very knowledgeable, but sometimes when his tweets, at least, he comes across as FBI Keystone Cops, and I don't buy that. You know what I'm saying? These are smart, intelligent people that got to where they got for a reason. And I don't buy the Keystone Cops that sometimes Ships like to sell.
Okay, well, I think I mean, in some cases, I think I do. In some cases, I don't. I think we just have to look at the facts. I mean, yeah, we're not obliged to agree with everything he says. But it's more, But I think in terms of the preset, I think you have to allow for Keystone Cops things as a sort of base case and see how far that's reasonable. And I think people are often too quick to assume that everything is planned and arranged ahead of time, and underestimate the ability of people just to screw things up. But I don't think we can generalize. I think we just have to take each incident on a case by case basis and arrive at our conclusion as to where the facts go, rather than an overall conclusion.
I 100% agree with Stephen. It's very difficult to underestimate the level of stupidity as well as incompetence in Washington, D.C. And I think if you look at the entire counterterrorism industry, you can get a pretty good sense of that. Now, I don't mean to excuse all of the corruption of U.S. spy services simply as incompetence. I'm just saying, absolutely, these are not 100% the smartest people who graduate great American schools.
Yeah, actually, I'll tell everybody like another incident I was involved in. I mean, I'm about ready to fade. It's here, but I was interviewed by there's an interview with me and the BBC that's going to be playing tomorrow on the ClimateGate hack, where I had a ground.
Please link it. Link it somewhere. I'd love to see it.
Okay, I'll put the link. It's on BBC Radio, but they've had 5 episodes, and the way that they were looking at it is that as the ClimateGate hack as a precursor to the DNC hack, and that it was really the earliest episode of Russian intervention in the in processes, and that there was a Russian attempt to upend the 2009 Copenhagen convention. And they interviewed various intel agencies, or an organization called Neon Century, and a former national security advisor in UK, all of whom talked about how this was exactly the sort of hack that the Russians did. And they talked to climate scientists who sort of went on and on about that it was Russians, or maybe it was US fossil fuel corporations. And then I actually sort of had been in contact, the I mentioned in it dozens of times, and the hacker, I'm one of the few people that was eventually given the password to the encrypted portion of the hack. And my theory is that the hacker was a reader of my blog, nothing more. He was a lone wolf reader. Also, there's evidence that one of the University of East Anglia scientists left his password in a publicly accessible part of his personal files, and that the FTP operations that the university had allowed people to drop into sort of supposedly private areas, so that there was no actual hack in the sense other than somebody found this password in plain view and went into the system. So, and ultimately, the BBC announcer or interviewer agreed that my theory was probably the right one. But at the same time, the closing argument was to sort of give oxygen to inflammatory theories that this was, even though it was probably just a blogger or a blog reader, that it was nonetheless the sort of the first act of Russian disinformation, and led to the DNC hack. And they kind of ignored the fact that there's no evidence for that. So but there's a large, but all the the corresponding people that we see in the sort of pontificating about the DNC hack, and all of them are totally convinced that the ClimateGate hack originated with intel agencies, and was was behind it, and it's just not, and I'm in a unique situation where where I know where I kind of know more about it than anybody.
That's amazing right there. Whoever wanted to jump in, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say that I'm just totally smitten by all your work, and especially, I mean, it's just weird because like Stephen is really knowledgeable about two areas here that I'm interested in, and one that I don't know that I disagree with him with or not, but the Russiagate, I'm totally on board. ClimateGate, I'm not sure. Like, I mean, I am a huge Carl Sagan fan, for example, okay, but I am not convinced for sure that politics has not taken a hold of all of this. And I've heard about your your work, and I see how good you are at Russiagate, and I just I'm interested to hear about I'm convinced that scientists, there's a consensus, at least whatever 30 40 years ago or whatever, among all scientists, that climate change, recently human intervention, 95% of scientists 10 years ago were on board with the idea that humans were responsible for the recent changes in climate, and that it's going to lead to our destruction because it's going to lead to the melting of all of the polar ice caps and the destruction of what's it called, it's like one living thing, and it's all across the equator. What is it called again? The thing that's like one organism. I'm kind of wrecked right now, but sorry. But anyways, it's what I'm talking about, the great coral reef. But anyway, has politics taken a hold of it? But it actually, like, Carl Sagan was really being honest about it a long time ago.
We don't have time to talk about it. I was just talking, like, in terms of big picture issues on climate, there we could talk for days on it. I was just talking about it, like, I think for present purposes, I'm just talking about the ClimateGate hack as a hack and how it connects to the present narrative. And
right.
I guess one of the things that shall we call him, Mr. Nelson and I are both interested in is just and I think I almost view as the next stage of this is we view the DNC hack itself as a dig here, and I mean there's just something odd about it.
Right.
I mean I don't know whether you want. I mean, I'm baffled. I'm baffled.
A huge discussion.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the next stage. Definitely the DNC hack, with all this stuff going down with Sussman involvement in that, and potentially Jaffe and stuff like that. I'm trying to bring in Felix Sater because he seemed like an interesting person to talk to, but I don't know, Felix. Can you click like I haven't done this. I've only hosted it, so there's like a speaker button or something like that. But it'd be great to hear from you.
Is Felix here?
Yeah, he's there. Felix? Hopefully we get to hear someone's requesting. 1 second. I've DM'd him that he's a speaker for sure. Oh, damn. Until he figures it out, let's see if Real CRNN wants to have a discussion. Welcome back.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks for all your work and sharing this important forum. I wanted to just ask a couple questions here. We were talking about where we think Durham's going to go. It feels a little bit like, to me, reading the indictment today, that he's continuing to lay groundwork and cover for the FBI, and hopefully that's not what's happening. I hope he nails and goes after Strzok and some of these guys and Page. Previously on the prior forum you guys had, Lee had mentioned kind of a two-pronged approach about this is both indictments and arrests, and then also messaging. And the question I have for you guys is on the messaging aspect, how do we discredit what we were talking about earlier, that ICA report? And then also Warner and Burr had their Senate report, and Schiff's had his House Intel memo. And I think that that political aspect is the public, informing the public. Do we think Durham somehow, some way might assist in discrediting those previous reports?
Well, I don't know if anybody else wants to comment. Oh, Jesus. I feel like from reports that Durham really isn't going after the ICA too much, but anything else he sort of debunks whatever he's going through in his investigation, which is pretty much leak proof. We'll see besides that. Lee,
yeah, but if I can ask, because I know that that Stephen and Hans and some of you other guys have been paying very close attention to the ICA, and I guess one of the weird, if the Wall Street Journal and other publications are saying, well, yeah, the ICA isn't in Durham's crosshairs, how do they know, right? If the idea is that Durham is not leaking, and from what I can tell, this seems to be true, right? The Durham team doesn't leak. So where's the Wall Street Journal getting this information that they're not, or other publications, that they're not going to go after the ICA? How do they know? Who's telling them this? So all I'm saying is, I don't know if they're looking at the ICA. I think that they've probably been looking, my sense is they've been looking at the ICA for a long time. Whether or not this is a serious subject of interest, I don't know. But I think they've been looking at it for a long time. So the people in the press are dismissing it. Again, how do they know? If we are to believe that the Durham team doesn't leak, how do they know?
I think that's a good point, because I don't think anybody actually knows about what they're looking at, because they didn't even know they had a grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia. So who knows what the hell he's been doing over there with the CIA over there and other things.
Right, but it's weird that they keep bringing up the ICA, right? It's like, why do you keep bringing up the ICA to say, yeah, nothing to look at here? Who's telling you there's nothing to look at with the ICA, right? Maybe Brennan's spokesman was entirely 100% on the level, saying there is nothing to look at here. John Brennan was just speaking with the John Durham team for 8 hours. That's all it was.
Yep.
Maybe that's what happened. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe not.
But it'd be really hard. It's going to be really hard to prove anything criminal in the ICA. Look back at the curveball and the WMD allegations, which were a big deal, and that unwound with the idea that with the sort of public recognition and statement that it was a colossal intel failure, and that the Iraq invasion was based on that, and it connects in a very interesting way to the Danchenko thing, because the curveball, the defects of the curveball reporting were eventually discovered through the fact that Curveball was not in Iraq at the time that he was supposedly a witness to things. So it was just ordinary cross-checking of dates and times, all of which should have been done before they invaded Iraq and relied on it. And the same thing is true of Danchenko, the cross-checking of dates and times of his, whether he could have met with, whether he did meet with Millian or did have a telephone call. are exactly the same failures as were made with Curveball and WMD. But the difference being that they, at least a year after the false intel report, they sort of admitted publicly that they'd made a false intel report, whereas in this one, they've covered it up for 5 years.
Remember the Ratcliffe memo, which I guess was released. We had reports of it in January 2017, January 2021, but we saw reports of it in March, right? And the Ratcliffe memo was about how CIA management, meaning Gina Haspel, was obscuring, blocking reports of CIA or of intelligence community analysts reporting about Chinese election interference, right? I mean, and this was pretty clear reporting. I would not be surprised. Of course, I have no idea whether or not it's happening, but I would not be surprised, given that was very clear, right? They had an IG looking at that reporting, and then Ratcliffe wrote a memo about it. If they were able to find different people at the CIA who were saying, like, yeah, Brennan and his team were tampering with our intelligence product regarding Russia, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, the other angle, Lee, I think, which I'm curious about, is Admiral Rogers was the one on that ICA report who didn't have high level of confidence. And then apparently he went up to Trump Tower to meet Trump and tell him that he thought these other guys were pushing this thing through. And I believe it was Clapper immediately wanted to have Rogers fired. And so maybe, I don't know if there's any potential criminal activity there.
I'll say that this is something that I'd like to report more, and my reporting right now on this is very thin, so I'm not going to go too far out. But my understanding is that the heroism of Admiral Rogers is mostly on this count, that on the ICA, he expressed moderate confidence. That was the big thing that he did. Other things that are generally attributed to him might be giving him too much credit. As an IC, I don't know, whistleblower is probably not appropriate, but as an IC truth teller, how's that? But I think that the big thing he did was saying, yeah, we do not have high confidence in this assessment that John Brennan and James Comey are trying to push me into. The NSA, we don't have the confidence that they're saying they have, and they're trying to draw us into. I don't think Rogers was a big hero.
I think that's
everyone. How do you raise a hand in this thing?
Hello?
Hey, BF, 1 second. We have Felix Sater over here, who's sort of another definite victim.
Sorry.
Hello,
Felix.
everyone. Yes,
hey,
sir.
Felix.
How are you?
What's up?
Thank you for inviting me in. It's a wonderful conversation. I wanted to say something to one of the people here, to Svetlana. I guess congratulations. It's been a really difficult day watching this. It's on one hand vindication, on another hand, 5 years of my life just torn to shreds, and being accused by these scum buckets of exactly what they were doing themselves is just
bingo,
mind-boggling to me. And how they picked this schmuck little KGB agent as who to arrest. He's a crawling little worm in this pond. They got the alligators involved in this, and who were knee deep. And I think everyone's missing the main story is, forget this little schmuck who's a KGB agent, straight up. Who was feeding him? Dolan. Did anybody look up who Dolan was and how long and how close he was to Hillary and Bill?
Very close.
I
I mean,
think
he's been a Democrat optimist.
read the Politico article that's out today about this subject. It ties it up nicely and describes, who Dolan is. And there's a New York Post article. At the end of the day, there was absolute Russian collusion. Only it wasn't by any of the people mentioned, especially not me and Donald Trump. That's for sure. I spent 20 years spying on the Russians for the United States government, CIA, NSA, FBI, more operations than I could think of. And recently found out that the work I did for the various agencies in the 2000s actually led to uncovering the DNC hack by the Russians. And I'll give you my quick view of it, of what was going on. Part of which I can prove, and part of it, there will be another shoe dropping in this, that I can assure you of, coming from me directly. Coming from me directly, ladies and gentlemen. The one thing I can tell you is that I know for a fact that this operation was ran by one of the KGBs, and I'll reveal in the future who that was. More importantly, there is a probability of high likelihood that it was blessed in Moscow, and that this entire operation was worked out with the Clintons, somewhat knowingly, somewhat unwittingly, because nobody thought that Donald would win, and Hillary and Vladimir despised each other with a passion. And if she was going to get in, she was going to do all sorts of nasty things to him. So actually getting some dirt and helping her out against her opponent was buying brownie points. These people are outright traitors to our country.
Guaranteed. And Felix, when you say the KGBs, what do you mean?
Well, the Soviet
SVR
Union.
and FSB, or
yes, yeah, basically the precursor. Okay. Who cares what their name is today? They could name themselves the Mickey Mouse Club for all I care. It's KGB.
That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, and they were absolutely involved. It wasn't this little schmo that got arrested, believe me, who is an agent, but he's like, he's one of 100 running around in the United States, pretending to be something that he's not. But the worst part is that the FBI knew that he was an agent. The FBI followed him. There's a lot of reporting on that. And there's a lot of years ago when he was still with, I think, Brookings Institute, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And yet they allowed this suspected KGB agent, I'll give him that just for sake of argument. The suspected KGB agent was the source.
No, wait. Charles Dolan said he was too young to be KGB, so FSB.
Right.
We'll say FSB.
Right, FSB. Amazing correction. Yes, I give it to them. It wasn't the KGB, it was the FSB.
May I ask
this is earth-shattering. I'm happy to answer, but I just want everyone to understand. The wife of a president of the United States, a secretary of state, her people, senior people, such as Dolan and others, by the way, there are others who are involved. Sussman is just rolls off the tip of the tongue, but there are others who are not yet named, who will be, were colluding with Russian intelligence to interfere with the US elections, and had the gall to actually paint that candidate with that brush. I mean, it's like living in an absurd alter universe or something. Anyway, I'll shut up and listen or answer any questions you have.
Oh no, that was awesome, Felix, and obviously you got brought into this shit for no fucking reason. It's ridiculous. But I mean, like you look at like the FSB pretty much right after the election when Dokuchayev and Igor Sushkin got brought down, but it all seems to kick back to Sergei Mikhailov, who they say might have been working for Brennan, and it sort of brings me back to that point where I don't know what the hell they were doing, but Sergei Mikhailov was sort of protected, and it seems like that FSB side might have been sort of in the bag for the U.S. government doing whatever the hell they were doing, and that makes a lot of sense for me.
Look, you're gonna love this. I was first recruited by the U.S. government by a guy named Milton Blaine in Moscow, and he was Defense Intelligence Agency. He was DIA, and he showed up at a restaurant where I was sitting with a bunch of KGB not KGB, they were all GRU guys. There wasn't one KGB guy there. They were all GRU, which was military intelligence. And one of the guys, literally in an open restaurant in front of all of these people, screams, "Hey, Milton, come on over here. Why don't you sit down across from Felix? Both you guys are CIA. You guys are going to love talking to each other." So then I went to so the guy's grilling me and asking me all sorts of questions. Later, I found out that he was asking me questions that he knew all the answers to. I go into the bathroom. He follows me in and says, "Can I have your phone number? I'd like to talk to you." I said, "Sure, no problem." I meet him at this expat bar in Moscow, where mostly Brits, Australians, Americans, they would all go there. And I met him there, and the guy turns around and says to me, they seem to take to you or let you in. And Felix, you have to understand, me and my friends have spent 20 years, and we'd have a party if we just found out the license plate number of one of the guys sitting at the table. You're sitting there drinking vodka with them and singing Russian songs. Your country needs you. And I turn around and said, "Done, I'm in." He turns around and says to me, if you get caught, you're going to hope and pray that they put a bullet in your head, because otherwise it's going to be a lot worse. You're a Jew who escaped Russia, betrayed the motherland, and then came back to spy on them. And I looked at him, I said, "Milton, are you trying to talk me into this or out of this?" I said, "Let's go." And that was my introduction to spying against these evil empire pieces of shit. And then
Are you kidding? That really happened?
That was a fact. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I mean, to a T. His name is Milton C. Blaine.
What jurisdiction you in?
I'm sorry. What? Which what?
What jurisdiction you in?
What do you mean? Right now?
Yeah.
I'm in Florida.
Not in New York?
No, I'm not in New York. I'm in Florida. It's too cold. It's getting cold. I mean, around Thanksgiving time, I'll show back up to have Thanksgiving with my family. But right now, it's getting a little too cold.
Okay, so
no, I'm actually doing some work down in Florida.
May I ask you a pointed question?
Please.
What do you think is going on specifically with everything? If you can sum it up, just in
when you say it's kind of too broad of a question. Could you narrow it a little?
Well, I mean, it's crazy, right? We have normal citizens like scrambling to understand what the hell is going on, and I seen your profile. You're an investment, yeah.
Yeah, I'm investing. Yeah. I was a real estate developer for a long time. I was partners with Donald.
I think a whole bunch of people on this feed are like, "What the hell is going on? What is going on?" And from your perspective, from your background, what the hell is going on? Because we can't figure it out. We can't figure out what our governments are doing, what private enterprise is doing. It's extremely troubling.
Well, it's kind of, I don't know. To me, being born and escaping from the Soviet Union, and you have to understand. When I say escaping,
my parents escaped from Poland.
No, dude, you don't understand. Both my great grandfathers were executed by the Soviets.
Yeah,
My father was
I
taken
hear
off a
you.
prison train to be allowed to immigrate and get the hell out of the country. And we ran from there.
I hear you. What
And
is
what is
going
going on? But
on?
hold on. I'm
BS.
going to tie this up.
No,
Hold on. I'm going to tie
BS.
this.
Do you actually have like a pointed question
No, I have
besides
an
what is
answer.
going on?
I think I hear what he's asking. I'd like to answer it. What's going on is that we are seeing long-term embedded operations that started in the 50s by the KGB and the Communist Party, starting with everything that they started doing, starting to take root in this country. And I'm actually, I hate to sound like an asshole, but I truly believe that the socialist sort of undercurrent has grabbed the hold of one of our political parties. And the shit that's going on is a combination of elites not wanting to lose power, push through their agenda. If you look at what's going on in the bigger picture, this is just, we're talking about treason and interfering with a presidential election by a presidential candidate with a foreign power. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because the rest of what's going on is all connected.
Yeah.
No, there were no 10 people sitting in a room who decided, let's pull this trigger, let's pull that trigger, whether it's a Brennan or even a Clinton or whoever. But I can assure you that there were 10 people in a room, well-trained little Marxist KGB boys, who in the mid-40s and 50s under Stalin decided, how are we going to destabilize the United States? You have to understand, they published papers when the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yep.
All that paperwork exists. Let us start seeding racism and all of that into the United States.
Cultural Marxism is what they're doing.
So no. Specifically, let's start feeding. You have to understand, in Russia, a major hero when I was a child, I mean literally a child, 5 years old, was Angela Davis. And
inform me, I don't know who that is.
Yeah, Angela Davis was like a Black Panther
yes,
member,
yes,
who now lives in Cuba, and Glorious Hollywood is now making a movie about her because she happens to be Tupac Shakur's aunt. Oh my God, let's line up and kiss her ass now, please. You're Tupac's aunt. Shit. No.
Yep, Sada Shakur, and yep.
What's going on is really, really simple.
If you look at what
the progressives are doing and
Felix,
the elites are doing,
Felix, your history is from Russia?
I was born in Russia. I was born in Moscow.
Yeah.
We emigrated and ran away from there. We're political refugees.
Yeah.
We were literally bought U.S. grain accords by Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon. We were bought. Jews for sale, baby.
Yep.
And we left when I just turned, no, I had not yet turned 6. I was 5 or 6. I was 5 or 6. Went to Israel for about a year. My dad fought in the 73 war, and then we immigrated from Israel to the United States.
Yeah.
And I arrived on the shores here, and it was stamped in my passport, political refugees from the Soviet Union.
My family, for what it's worth, and it's worth nothing for this audience, they were in Ukraine, and they fucking left in the 30s because they saw what was going on, and they're like, oh my God, it's coming. Okay? And what we're seeing today is it is mirrors and shades and echoes of everything we've seen before. What the hell are we not doing about this?
Dude, I don't know. There's no shades or echoes. I watch certain shows on certain programs like MSNBC and certain shows on CNN, and it's like watching Channel 1 News in Moscow. With the entire fucking propaganda. It's Pravda. And groupthink and the bourgeois. And let's slaughter the bourgeoisie.
It's dog whistles all day, every day.
All day, every day.
Right. It's Pravda.
It's
Pravda directed towards whatever you want the end result to be if you are in power. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
not what exactly what's going on.
That's not what the media is for. The media is for every objective perspective to give the masses something to slice on and figure out their own clue. And that's not what's happening. And it's all around, and it's particularly bad in the Anglo-West. And I can't figure out in the Anglo-West why it's so bad in the Anglo-West.
It's getting even worse. There's a trend. Well, there's a situation. There's a shift, a historical shift right now. When we say the press, I mean, who gives a shit about CNN? On a good day, they get good.
CNN is a fucking shit show,
dude. On a good day. Well, what do you want? It was started by what was her name? Hanoi. What's her name?
But I mean, it sounded good when this was CNN.
But hold on. Yeah, it's really cool. They get 700,000 people. There's some 14-year-old kid on Twitter playing a video game who's got 10 times the followers. So we are now moving into social media, and these people don't even have any rules, and they have zero rules. There are hundreds of millions of people on places like Twitter and Facebook and all of that. And they are canceling people.
Right.
They're not allowing a former president to even have an account. Do you understand the gravity of that?
No. Wait.
Who gives a shit what Rachel Maddow has to say?
Hold on. The gravity is they cancel the president of the United States, who is, quote unquote, the leader of the free world.
Yes.
That's
and
nuts.
Nobody says
and by the way,
they're protected. And they're protected.
I know.
And they have a license that says they're allowed to do it because they're nothing more but a platform.
I know.
Right? But they're not a platform. Now they're an editor. But they're an editor. They're not a platform.
This is nuts. By the way,
it's
I have
nuts.
to give a shout out to Lee Smith, who's active on social media and real media. Kudos to you. Just for a sec and continue on. Sorry.
No, Lee, I haven't read your stuff, but I'm going to tonight because this is one of those nights that I'm staying up and just reading everything I can.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate that, but I can't advise you staying up all night reading my stuff. Lee, by the way, Lee, I do anyhow. It might very well put you to sleep.
Also a good solution.
No. Lee, there you go. By the way, I'm in Canada, and we're under tyranny. Oh. So your stuff is good. Where is Canada? Yeah, but I don't know actually. We're just one iota. We're one iota less than Australia. You're somewhere south of Australia. I've heard of your country. Someday I hope to visit. I understand you play a game on ice. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. We play hockey, but we're not allowed in the. By the way, Lee, we're not allowed in the rink unless I'm vaccinated for some reason. Apparently, this is nuts. Yeah. We're in insane land now. My God, it is kind of great. It is kind of great. The country that has hockey, where you run people up against the boards and stick your knee in their groin. No. And you put your stick in their jaw. It's like, hey, by the way, you can't do that unless you have a vaccine. Wait, you almost killed them on the ice. Yeah. But if you don't have the vaccine, you're not allowed. You just skated across that 15-year-old's wrist. Yeah, and you also endangered him for a risk you don't know. Yeah. What the hell is going on?
My favorite comparison is actually to basketball. So a bunch of guys running around, sweating on each other, handling the same ball.
One moment.
They have to
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry. Is that a New York accent?
That is a New York accent.
Ah, goddamn.
I grew up 47 years.
Have you not been paying attention?
Brooklyn, baby.
You Brooklyn folk? Oh, Christ.
No, but basketball, think about it. You got 10 guys running around sweating, handling the same ball, all of it. But when they sit down on the bench, they have to put their mask on.
Yeah. I know. Fool, it's idiotic. Fool. It's stupid. Or Mr. Nelson. Professor Nelson. I have to say, this is like totally turning into like a late night TV show now.
I know.
Or something
It's
like
because of
that.
me.
Like when I was a kid,
By the
it was
way,
like,
it's because of me.
Yeah. It was like Tom Snyder. We used to watch this like, I don't know, 70 years ago or something like that. That's what this feels like. It's like, look, everyone's talking about Brooklyn. For God's sake, man. It's like, all right, let's all meet at Coney Island and get some vodka.
This, I mean, this.
You know, no, it's
Yeah,
fun.
this feeling definitely like
Lee,
SNL, like
Lee,
way.
by the way,
to talk
I'm
to
from Edmonton, Alberta,
Well,
and I would have loved to have grown up in goddamn New York, but not really.
Yeah.
Well,
you say that. Yeah, you say that. It's better than growing up in that wasteland in Edmonton or whatever, man. Come on.
You better look up Edmonton.
Really, this is like an insane TV show now.
Do you want? Hey, Lee,
after hours
Lee
with
and
Fool.
company.
Yeah.
What I'd like to say is that this thing and the craziness and the idiocracy of what is going on, I think, has brought so many people together in so many different realms. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have no idea.
Absolutely.
So let's blame the Canadian.
I feel like I should move on to other people that have been waiting for a little bit. Thuz?
Yeah, I had a quick comment on the ICA, but once we're talking about the media, also I was going to chime in that, arguing about why the media is the way it is when we have Lee, the foremost expert on the history of the media and why it is the way it is. So I'm glad you chimed in. But I'm just, I guess once we're on there, it's Lee. One of the best things I've read in years was that column you wrote in Tablet a couple of years ago about like basically the Arabization of the U.S. media. How now when you used to be when you read the paper, you wanted to know what was in it, you wanted to know the news, and now you just look at which apparatchik in the government is this columnist a mouthpiece for, and it's totally changed the way I read and view the media. And and it's basically you just got who is their constituency. It used to be the public was the constituency. You wanted to sell a product, which was the news, and now that's just not the case.
Hey, Lee,
thanks,
I have a question
appreciate
for you.
that, but
Lee is one of the greatest.
Lee, do you want to read everybody the text I sent you 2 days ago? Not today, 2 days ago.
I don't know. It's pretty short. I mean, I think I probably memorized it. No? It's just like something like nice to make your.
No, you remember I sent you? Said wait till 2 days ago. I'm just.
Wait till
this was 2 days ago before this guy got arrested. Wait till I tell the world who Steele and Simpson were actually working for. Story will blow up a lot of secret shit and all of it illegal.
I think you had that in public actually, so it wasn't just to me. So I think that was a public notification. Thank God, that was a very very important thing.
We're having an interesting moment in our history, and it's not a healthy moment, but maybe it is. Maybe we need a little bit of a cleansing.
It's absolutely necessary, Felix.
Well, there's a problem with cleansings because they're usually associated with a little shitty thing called war. And the shakeout is, I honestly believe, and I speak to people that are in the Pentagon, they're not having a conversation about if, they're having a conversation about when armed conflict happens in China. And that's when you start getting back to a little bit of nationalism and come together. You sort of need an enemy.
Hey, Felix, man.
Hello? Hello?
I can hear you.
Yeah, now I can hear you. Go ahead. You dropped out for a second.
My bad. I had to add another speaker, and I guess it kicked him out. By the way, when I add another speaker, I guess I can only have 10. They kick the other people out. Felix, you can go ahead. Sorry.
No. I've said too much. I've manipulated the whole room for too long. It's time to shut up and listen.
No, that was the point.
Wait, so who
to you?
So who were Simpson and Steele actually working for?
Yeah, there we go.
I said it earlier. One of the KGBs, one of the FSBs, or whatever you want to call them.
They were still taking money from the Clinton campaign.
Yeah, but they were taking money from both. No. They actually took money from them.
Right? Sure, why not?
Of course.
Felix, if I can ask, hey, this is Lee again. If I can ask, like, why did they go after you? They're just like, because you were like,
I'm easy.
your family was from Russia. You're a Russian Jew. They said like, oh yeah, here's a Russian guy. He worked in Trump's office building. Let's go after
someone in the
this
Square
guy.
community won't give a shit about.
Exactly. They needed. Look, when you're, excuse my language. I apologize. I hope you forgive me. But when you need to fuck somebody, you need a good condom. I was that condom. I was an easy mark. I had a criminal conviction. 2, one for a bar fight, one for a Wall Street scam. I was working with Donald Trump. I was his senior advisor. I was his partner on a bunch of deals. I tried to do Trump Moscow. That was my deal. But I tried to do it like 5 times when we were working together. And then when he ran, I was like, hey, it's a good idea. Now that he's getting some good press in Russia, we could actually get our 15% branding fee. And I started working because nobody thought that he would win. And I was just like the perfect candidate. Oh my God. There we go. We got a gangster Russian, blah, 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 working with Donald, funneling dirty Russian money and everything ridiculous. And they just ran with it. And it was a concocted story, and it was a concocted dossier, and they needed players in their disgusting drama. And I fit one of the bills. I fit one of the bills, and they said, bingo, and they went after me.
Hey, could I just jump in for 1 sec?
But do you still believe in Trump?
Of course. When you say believe in Trump, what does that mean? Do I believe in Trump? A lot of things that he stands for, believes in, and has done, I support 100%. I also think he should, watch his mouth a little bit here and there, but generally speaking, yeah, very much so.
No, good. No, as do I.
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, Postal Taxi, is that your main question, or I'd like to finish if you have any more points?
No, well, actually, I was going to talk about. I think you were talking about some things before, and I think the 2 main words I would say from your earlier point was regulatory capture. I think that the way that commercial industry has encompassed government is something that everybody should be aware of, and see how commercial industries, especially the pharmaceutical industry and other industries, energy industries, have wrapped themselves around world governments in a way that is quite scary to me, to be honest. I think that corporate entities have too much power over the world at the moment, and they probably need to be put back in the box at some point, and we need to go back to a system of governments that is more localized, and for people in smaller areas that look after people within their own regions, rather than corporations that are basically just trying to drive profit out of every single thing that they possibly can in the world.
Well, I think that decentralization in government is very important, and I think that's like sort of the Republican mantra. Even though I feel like the Republican Party has been kind of like a big government, big corporation company party for a long time, and I think that changed with Trump. But I don't know if Steve had anything to say after that. I saw him
Guys,
kind of peeking
they're
in.
both hooked on corporate money. That's the problem.
Felix, I got a question. In terms of how the Clinton campaign sort of connected to the KGB people that do you have any sort of people that sort of, like, where did they meet? Who was talking to who? Or any ideas on that?
No, a lot of ideas, but look, meetings like that, they don't invite people with cameras in. Number one.
No, I understand
But there's
that.
a
But I mean,
lot of there's beyond proof, and there's beyond an overabundance of circumstantial evidence. And I, for one, am a huge believer in coincidences, except when that number hits 19. That's like too many coincidences for it to be a coincidence at that point, you know?
Right. But who?
I
Like,
can't
who
I
would
can't I
be?
can't say specifically, but I'm telling you the very, very top of one of the agencies from the former Soviet Union colluding with directly with senior members of the Clinton administration, or former Clinton administration, people close to the Clintons. Period. Dealing directly and
Most
being
people know
and
who
being
that is,
paid
I reckon.
and being paid very handsomely a lot of money by that intelligence agency, which is controlled by the overall FSB from Moscow.
So why did they? Where did Danchenko come from? And then why did they use him?
Oh, they used a bunch of people. What do you think? Some of it were witting, unwitting, dumb,
because he's
smart.
Brookings.
You know, when you run an intel operation, you know, you got 14 different avenues to get to the end game. You don't know which one is going to be successful in doing what. I mean, you can't possibly think that they bet strong on this clown. He's a fucking clown.
Okay, who else? But he's sort of the one that came to surface. I mean, who else were they running?
There'll be others. There'll be others. Yes, there will be other names.
But we haven't heard of them yet.
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect. Hey, Scott Stedman entered the chat. He's got his hand up. What's up, Scotty?
Hey, I just wanted to ask Felix if he was, if he had any updates on the Kazakhstan money laundering case, and if he has any comments on if he laundered any of the Krapanov money.
Did I launder any of the Krapanov money? No,
Yeah,
I never laundered money. No, I never laundered money for Ilias.
Not into Trump Soho or elsewhere?
You mean 2 apartments that he bought for himself and his sister with his own money?
Yeah, was that money stolen from BTA?
Was that money stolen from BTA?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I'll tell you where that money may have come from. Nazarbayev's daughter, the president of the country, paid Ilyas's mother, under the force of going to jail, $300 million for her media empire. Maybe they used some of the $300 million. How did Nazarbayev's daughter get it in the first place? Are you kidding me? Seriously, you're asking if Ilyas Krapanov bought 2 apartments in Trump Soho, by the way, without me, which he did without me, for a total of $4 million.
A cut of that sale?
No, I did not get a cut of that sale. No, I did not get a cut of that sale.
Okay.
Hey, Scott, let him
and more importantly, Scott, do you understand who Kazakhstan is? Who was involved in this? You didn't ask.
I haven't been paid by anyone, no. So I don't have any insights.
Well, I'll tell you what. The guy that's in my litigation, the guy that's suing me, happened to have wired $150,000 directly to Hunter Biden. Are you aware of that, Scott?
Oh, interesting. No, I'm happy to look into
his
that.
Name is Kenis Rakishev. Look it up. Kenis Rakishev from BTA Bank wired $150,000 to Hunter Biden. Explain that one to me.
Interesting. I'd love to see that wire.
Open the laptop up.
Okay, let me step in because I've looked a lot at the Ablyazov mining deal on Eurasia, and
so you'll know that Joseph Mifsud's lawyer had a big deal with him, right?
Yeah, I know that's all bullshit.
Oh yeah,
I know. I know how Bill Clinton was in Kazakhstan when Frank Giustra signed up the uranium assets out of Kazakhstan. There were uranium assets that were worth $1 billion that were that Ablyazov and the embezzled from the Kazakh government. He flipped them into a Western company called Eurasia, which was controlled by Frank Giustra in Vancouver, who was a buddy of Bill Clinton. And Giustra later then gave $120 billion to the Clinton Foundation. So I mean, in terms of some apartment buildings, some apartment somewhere, it's nothing. Bill Clinton made $120 million out of the embezzlement of, and that's what they've showed. I mean, how much he made in offshore companies, I don't know, but there was $1 billion stolen out of Kazakhstan in that uranium deal, and the U.S. media focus on the Uranium One permit while Hillary was Secretary of State is kind of missing where the money was made, and that was on Eurasia, which then did a reverse takeover of Uranium One, which was a reputable company, and so Giustra blew out his stock and made $1 billion, and then by the time that Kazakhstan started investigating it, they started challenging the title of Uranium One to it, which was by that time held by people who paid value for it. So Hillary's main interest in that was to cover it up. And that's when the Russians came in and they sorted out the title problems in Kazakhstan, but got control of the asset. So there's a lot to it. It's a long story.
By the way, when you ask about Ablazov money, you do realize that Ablazov was partners with and he was the Minister of Energy for Nazarbayev before they turned on each other. You are aware of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you be concerned taking, helping
Scott,
a
Scott,
foreign government official move some of his money into the U.S.?
Scott, let me ask you.
Isn't that what we're all against here? Dirty money in the U.S.
General actual premise. Rebut that. What is your point of being here?
I just wanted to ask Felix. I'll shut up now.
No, it's quiet. No. Listen, he bought 2 apartments in Trump Tower. Yes, he did. But him and his family are worth $300 million just from Nazarbayev giving them $300 million. What makes you think they couldn't afford $4 million of apartments? Or what makes you think that it had to be dirty and laundered? They have hundreds of millions of dollars in their bank accounts, and they bought it, and everyone knew that they bought it. It wasn't hidden. It was an LLC registered in his name, and he bought the apartments. And you're making it seem like it's a huge conspiracy to launder $4 million. These people piss $4 million out at breakfast. Do you realize who you're talking about? These people are either accused of stealing $10 billion, or are worth $100 billion, or received $300 million. You're asking me if there was a undercover money laundering operation to buy two units for $4 million? That's the joke.
Blue Anon.
Yep.
He's gone.
Yeah, of course he's gone.
Hey, can I chime in here?
He's gonna go. He's gonna go to his talk with Molly Zhang Foss or whatever, Fong or whatever her name is.
He'll write up a story how Fool Anon's group fucked him up a little bit. But yeah, familiar?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the matter, which is a common phrase used in modern journalism. First of all, I want to say that it's a shame Julie Lewis left, because I'm sure she would really enjoy Felix being here.
I love Julie. She's the best. She's great.
She's great. She's great. I love her.
She's like a mom from Ohio that, picked up the flag and said, "I'm not letting this one fall."
Yeah. Second, I think it's hilarious that Scott Stedman came in here. That's just fucking hilarious. I don't know what he was expecting. All right.
On the day that Dolan and a KGB agent who was just arrested by Durham exposes the entire thing, his main question is, did I help Ilyas Khrapunov buy 2 units in Trump Tower and call it money laundering? I mean, seriously, that didn't bother them that the Clintons were involved in conspiracy and fraud and election interference. It's the $4 million worth of apartments in Trump Tower.
Nobody cares about the real estate at all. Nobody. It's stupid. So anyway, I want to go back.
I have an anecdote. I was asked by Mueller, why does Donald love these Russians so much, and why was he courting them to sell them units? And I said to him, because their checks clear.
They have
and
money.
The following year, the Brazilians were flush, and we chased them.
It doesn't matter who it is.
I think I can distill that down into a more simple thing: Christian values.
Anyway, I want to go back to to go back to Michael Flynn, if possible.
Before Felix, could I ask Felix, who were the FBI agents that were in your interview?
Well, one guy that I knew for years and years and years is the only one that I really remembered because I know him so well. And that was it wasn't an interview. There was Mueller's people there. It was Andrew Weissman was there, and what's her name, the Asian girl.
Right. No, but the names of all of those people.
Bill McCausland. Bill McCausland. Bill McCausland was in the. I'm sorry, I got to give you this anecdote. I think everybody will appreciate this. So now Mueller's team, right? They have the smoking gun. They've got the Russian who laundered money for the Russians with Donald, and they bring me and they had an office down in the Commerce Department in the basement. That's where the skiff was. So they called me down. I have to go down. I bring my lawyer, Robert Wolf. We walk in, and there's a row of like 4 FBI agents, 4 prosecutors, and obviously me and my lawyer have to sit on this side of the table, and the 8 of them, and there's a head chair waiting for somebody to come in. And that's it. They're loaded for bear. This is it. Everybody's going to make their careers. Sater, the douchebag, the money launderer. We got him. This is it. We're all becoming attorney generals off of this one. And as I walk into the room, you could feel the tension. It was like walking into a cell block. Bill McCausland gets up, walks around, grabs my hand, puts the other hand on my shoulder, and says to me, Felix, Alexandra must be in college already. Alexandra's my oldest daughter. I said, Bill, are you kidding me? She graduated. She's working already. And I look over, and the other 7 of them are waiting to cut Bill McCausland to pieces because he's now saying hello to the enemy. And they're seething, and they finally shut him up. And then Weissman walks in. Looks